on? This is Aaron Knapp, and you're tuned into Unplugged, broadcasting without permission. This is a place where the truth gets louder, and we dig deeper, and where we always remember, be lawful, not awful. If you want the full stories, the documents, the videos, and everything they don't want you to see, head on over to Aaron Knapp, unplugged.com. My new home for every investigation, every episode, and every update. And while you're here, be sure to like the video, follow the page, and hit subscribe. And share this with someone who needs the truth. We're building something real here. We're building something fearless. And we're doing it together. Welcome to Unplugged. Let's kick this thing off.
Plug with Knapp. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Knapp. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Knapp. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoy.
Well, good evening there, Lorain City and beyond. This is Aaron Knapp here, bringing you all the news that is new. Tonight, we have a good one for you. That's right. Tonight, we're going to talk about something that sounds boring at first glance. Payroll reports. Scheduling software, administrative approvals, internal forms that most people never see and probably never even think about. Honestly, you don't really give a crap. I didn't. It bored me to death. I sat on some of this stuff for over a year or more. Actually, apparently, didn't even realize the gold mine. Well, I knew kind of what I was sitting on, but the kind of paperwork that sits quietly inside a government filing system year after year, collected, archived, and then just kind of forgotten, right? And so, and by the way, I apologize for being a little late today. I was putting the final touches on this podcast. I still have a whole second article to finish writing and whatnot, but I wanted to get this podcast out as I'm still doing the research. So most people assume that these records exist only for accounting purposes, but something for a finance office, right? Something for human resources. Something that gets printed, right? Signed, filed away, put in a box, never talked about ever again. Bingo, bango, right? But every once in a while, paperwork tells a story. That's why I love requesting records. But every once in a while, it tells a story no press release ever can or will. Tonight, we're going to talk about that. How, according to Kieran Shaver, a simple public records request inside Lorain City Hall that could have easily been made by me or Garen or any group quietly turned into a state-level investigation at the auditor's level that involved Lorain County Prosecutor's office at the time, J.D. Tomlinson. It had all the players, right? It had Resendez, Longacare, but the prosecutor's office and investigators from the state auditor were all out there, the special investigations unit. Now, if you guys follow my work for even a brief minute, I mean, I know some people act like they have no clue that they even know what I do, but you already know that public records are a huge part of what I do. Ohio's public record law exists for a reason. And even though some lawmakers may be trying to change that up a little bit, it exists so citizens can see like what their government is doing with public money. It also exists so that taxpayers can verify that decisions inside the government buildings match the reality inside the financial records. Now, most of the time someone files a public records request, they just get exactly what they expect: a spreadsheet, a report, a stack of PDFs. Kind of boring stuff, but sometimes the documents confirm what officials already said publicly, right? Sometimes the numbers are exactly what the city says they are. Sometimes the story ends right there. Bingo, bango, we're done. But occasionally the process of gathering these records forces someone inside the government to look more closely at their own systems than they expected to. Now, that's exactly what happened here, supposedly, reportedly, allegedly, because the story did not begin with an accusation. It supposedly, allegedly began with a whistleblower. No, wait, that's not correct. It actually began with a criminal complaint. Wait, no, that's not correct either. Well, I mean, of course, it began when someone inside City Hall had to pull payroll records, right, and look at stuff. Those records included scheduling data, compensation entries, administrative approvals, and the internal systems used by the city of Lorain to track employee work hours and pay classifications. Now, the type of data that normally moves through payroll offices without much public attention at all. But when those numbers were assembled and reviewed all together, something unusual appeared. Questions. Not dramatic accusations, not instant conclusions, just questions. Questions about scheduling patterns, questions about how hours were recorded, questions about how certain administrative approvals lined up with the payroll entities and entries. And when those questions started circulating inside the building, the issue did not remain an internal curiosity for very long, right? Because payroll records are not just paperwork; they represent taxpayer dollars. Every hour recorded, every overtime entry, every classification change between hourly and salaried employment, all of it ultimately translates to public funds being spent. And those systems appear, when those systems actually start to appear inconsistent, even slightly inconsistent, the consequences can move very quickly beyond City Hall. And that's exactly what happened here. What started as a routine review of payroll documentation eventually reached the attention of the Lorain County Prosecutor's Office. Now, from there, the matter reached the investigators at the Ohio State Special Investigations Unit, the state agency responsible for examining potential misuse of public funds. Now, suddenly, this same paperwork that most people would have ignored because, is a center of a state level inquiry. Now, tonight's episode is not about speculation. It's not about rumors. It's not about the social media commentary or political talking points. Sorry, my allergies are acting up. Spring must be coming. Tonight, we are going to talk about, or really just walk through the actual administrative trail that exists inside these records. Payroll documentation, scheduling records, personnel evaluations, administrative approvals, internal policies that govern how hours are reported and how employees are compensated. Because when you put all those records side by side, they begin to paint a picture of how the system inside City Hall actually functions. And sometimes the most important stories are actually in the government and about the government are found not in speeches or council meetings, thank God. Sometimes they're found in spreadsheets. And sometimes they're found in internal forms, emails, stuff that no one expected the public to ever read. And sometimes the act of simply asking for those documents forces the government to confront questions it did not expect to answer. And it also gives the public an eye on transparency. Tonight, we're going to talk about how that process unfolded inside Lorain City Hall, how a routine payroll documentation turned into a state-level investigative review, and why the quiet mechanisms of government accounting can sometimes reveal more than any press conference ever could. Because when it comes to the public money, the numbers always matter, folks. And sometimes the numbers tell a story by themselves. I mean, just ask Catherine Kennedy. She'll tell you in the county that the numbers never lie. She's accurate with her numbers. You should check her out. She's got her own page. I forget the name of it, Accountability in Lorain, Lorain County by the numbers. But she does great budget analysis, and I have a little section of my own page dedicated to her analyses and reports. But sometimes those numbers do tell a story, and how this investigation actually began. This story didn't begin with a criminal complaint, and it wasn't some dramatic accusation, although you kind of think it should have been. And it didn't begin with a whistleblower walking into the prosecutor's office carrying a stack of documents. It just began apparently from something kind of more ordinary, a request for payroll records involving leadership of the Lorain Police Department. At some point, a request was submitted to the City of Lorain seeking compensation data covering the police chief and command staff over a span of several years. Like most public records requests involving payroll information, that request eventually reached the office of the city auditor. Because the auditor's office is responsible for maintaining and producing payroll records for municipal employees, this is part of the process most people never see. When a city receives a public records request, the response is not automatic. Someone inside the government actually has to generate the report. They have to pull the payroll system, open it all up, print it, pull all the relevant data, then determine which employees fall into the scope of the request. They have to run the reports, export the reports, verify the information matches what the request asks for. In many cases, that means generating detailed payroll summaries showing dates worked, hours coded in the system, compensation categories, overtime entries, leave balances, various forms of specialty pay that may apply to law enforcement personnel, like are you the chief or not the chief? And most of the time, the process is pretty routine. An employee runs the reports, confirms the totals, converts the files to PDFs or spreadsheets, and the records are sent out to the requester. No bingo bango, right? No big deal. But this request did not stay routine for very long, because when payroll reports were generated in response to the request, the numbers apparently raised questions. The data showed patterns that did not immediately make sense when compared to the other internal records. In particular, there were entries connected to something known as in the law enforcement payroll systems as what they call higher position pay. Higher position pay. Higher position pay is not unusual. In fact, it's a standard practice in many police departments across the country. When a supervisor or commanding officer is absent from duty, another officer may temporarily step into that role for a shift or for part of a shift. During that time, the acting officer may receive compensation at a higher rate associated with that supervisory position. The concept's simple. The captain fills in for the chief during a shift. The captain may be receiving the chief's rate of pay for those hours. If the lieutenant fills in for a captain, the same principle applies. It's designed to ensure the officer temporarily carrying the additional responsibility receives the appropriate amount of compensation for doing that particular job. Now, that system only works properly when the records align, though. Now, when we have higher position pay appears in the payroll system, it usually means that higher ranking supervisor was not present for the shift. In other words, someone else stepped in. So when payroll records show higher pay being issued to one command staff officer while the chief's schedule still appears to reflect the normal work week, investigators want to naturally know why. It doesn't automatically prove wrongdoing. Payroll systems are complex. Scheduling systems and payroll systems do not always align perfectly. There may be explanations involving training, meetings, off-site assignments, administrative duties, or other legitimate reasons that a supervisor might actually not physically be in the building, and still be at work or something, which that makes it okay. But when the numbers do not line up in an obvious way, the responsible thing to do is to ask, right? Ask questions. Well, that's exactly what happened here. Once those questions surfaced during the review of the payroll documentation, the issue began moving beyond the routine administrative process of responding to a records request. What began as a request for payroll data started attracting attention inside City Hall, and then from there, the matter eventually moved beyond City Hall entirely. And because when the question involved the use of taxpayer funds, especially in connection with payroll records and public employee compensation, those questions can quickly reach agencies whose job it is to investigate how public money is spent. And that's just how simple a request for payroll records quietly turned something much larger than anyone expected when the request was first submitted. Now, before I move on to the next section, I want to be transparent here and be obvious. Like, obviously, somebody knew what they were doing when we requested this stuff. It was very specific. It was very centered. Granted, sometimes, I could be wrong. Because sometimes when I request that kind of stuff, I'm not really looking for any one thing in particular. You get it, and you look at it, and you move on. What ended up happening here was, I'm pretty sure there were some disgruntled people here. I'm willing to understand. I wasn't around them, but there was issues between Chava and McCann. And it comes up in the audio files here where McCann is saying, or at least in his paperwork, he's saying, we brought charges against her family, or we've investigated her family. He made it seem like it was retaliation. It's just, I get it. There's a lot at play here. But the bottom line is that what we're looking at here is what apparently really, whether it was with, somebody was mad at him or not, when the paperwork was sent to me that I received, which was payroll documentation and handwritten letters or typed letters that were mailed to me in an envelope that, the sheriff wants to keep and not return to me. And they were specific, much more specific than the file that I got here. So I just wanted to point that out, full transparency, But the payroll system behind the question is where we're at. So before we get into the meeting that eventually took place with the investigators, it's important to understand how payroll inside the Lorain Police Department actually works. And I didn't even realize it either. As I read through this stuff, I had to educate myself. But the structure of that system explains why the questions emerged from records review mattered. Like police departments are not like most government offices. City halls may operate on a standard weekly schedule, but police departments operate 24 hours a day, right? 7 days a week, every day of the year. Officers are working rotating shifts, overtime assignments, court appearances, special details, and emergency calls. Because of that constant activity, departments rely on specialized scheduling systems designed specifically for public agencies or public safety agencies. I'm sorry. And in Lorain, the police department uses a scheduling software known as Telestaff. That's Telestaff for those following along at home. Telestaff is widely used across the country by police and fire departments because it allows agencies to track the complicated staffing structures required to maintain round the clock operations. Now, the system records who's assigned to work which shift, which officers are scheduled to work, who is off duty, who's filling in for another person, and when overtime or special assignments occur. Still, you wonder who's cheating, who's being true. No, sorry. Inside the system, supervisors can record when an officer temporarily fills a higher ranking role. So, for example, if a captain covers a shift that would normally be supervised by the chief, well, that information can be entered into the scheduling system so the payroll office knows that officer for that time frame is entitled to the higher pay for that period of time. Now, once those entries are recorded, the information does not immediately turn into a paycheck, right? The scheduling data is only the first step in a much larger and longer administrative process. The payroll clerk compiles the data, coming from the system, the scheduling system, check or whatever, and then from there, it's reviewed by supervisors within the department. And after the review, the payroll file moves through the administrative chain of command, including the office of the safety service director, my buddy. Only after those internal approvals does the information actually move to the city auditor's office, where the payroll payments are processed by the auditor. Now, on paper, this structure creates multiple layers of oversight. Scheduling entries originate inside the department. Supervisors review the entries. Administrative officials must approve the payroll file. The city auditor office processes the final payments. In theory, each step provides an opportunity to verify that the information moving through the system is accurate. But payroll reports themselves only capture certain pieces of that process. Now, they show the compensation categories that were entered into the system, yeah. They show how many hours were coded under each category. They show the approvals that occurred, the payments were processed, and what those reports do not always show is how the work actually occurred on the ground, right? So a payroll report might actually show that an officer received higher position pay for a certain number of hours. And it might also show that a supervisor was paid under a particular classification for a given shift. But the report alone doesn't explain the operational circumstances that led to those entries being recorded. That distinction becomes important because when the investigators start reviewing payroll records in detail, because when the numbers appear inconsistent in scheduling patterns or supervisory roles, investigators have to move beyond the payroll reports themselves and begin to ask questions, right? Asking questions about how those entries were created, about who approved them, and what circumstance led to those pay categories appearing in the system. And that's exactly where this story begins, to move from routine administrative paperwork into something that attracted the attention of the investigators a little bit more like a magnet. So all this stuff kind of floats around. Granted, like I said, I'm willing to admit that there's probably a connection between this report and, outgoing officers and the auditor. And in all fairness, since it's in McCann's name and they're going to be brought up in here anyway, it's probably Watkins, definitely Shaver, McCann. I know some other people were involved. I believe Riley was involved because he's mentioned in here, I think. But the meeting at the prosecutor's office. Now, once the concerns about the payroll records had moved beyond internal discussions inside City Hall, that matter, it went quick. beyond routine administrative review. The questions surrounding the payroll documentation and the higher position pay were serious enough that a meeting was scheduled with the Lorain County Prosecutor's Office so investigators could examine the issue more formally. And that would have been Rich Resendez, Garrett Longacore, J.D. Tomlinson's office. I know James Burge was present. According to the investigative activity report prepared by the Ohio State of Auditor's investigative unit, that meeting took place on May 10th of 23. Present in the room were several key figures connected to the investigation. From the state's Auditor's Special Investigation Unit, they had Investigator Greg Kopnitsky and Forensic Audit Manager Carrie Yoder. And then from that, we determined that their office from the auditor had been assigned the case after concerns involving payroll practices were raised and referred for review. For the Lorain County Prosecutor's Office, Prosecutor J.D. Tomlinson attended the meeting. Also present from the county were Investigator Garrett Longacre, and Investigator Rich Resendez, along with James Burge, who served as the chief of staff for the prosecutor's office at the time. The City of Lorain, they were discussing about everything that had happened, this report of activity. It was going on in the City of Lorain, and the meeting itself was recorded and summarized in the investigative report. Like the documents themselves note that there was a document notes that the written summary is not intended to be a verbatim transcript of the discussion. The conversation began with a review of multiple complaints that had been raised by Lorain City Auditor Karen Shaver. And at the time, the auditor had submitted several concerns involving payroll and administrative practices across different departments with the city government. Some of those complaints involved overtime practices in the city's utilities billing office and administrative departments. Other concerns involved payroll documentation and time reporting in the law department. But one complaint quickly drew particular attention, and that was the payroll practices involving the Lorain Police Department's command staff. It wasn't just McCann, it was the staff. According to the complaint described during the meeting, Shaver believed that the payroll records indicated that the police chief, James McCann, was receiving higher pay for those days he was not physically working. And while at the same time, captains within the department were receiving higher position pay for acting in the chief's role. Those captains included Captain Michael Fowling, now the chief, Captain Roger Watkins, now with Sheffield Village, Sheffield, I think, and Les Palmer, who had reportedly received higher pay, position pay during the periods that the chief was allegedly not present for duty. Now, then that came from that report that I got, right? It was written down in there. The concern as described during the meeting was straightforward. If a captain was being paid higher position pay because the chief was absent, then the chief should not simultaneously be receiving regular pay at the same period of time. In other words, two officers should not be receiving compensation for performing the duties of the chief during the same time frame. The question that led investigators, that was the question that led investigators to focus on one central issue, which was documentation, which you guys know. I love documentation. Did you document it? Because it's the key to everything. At one point in the meeting, investigators asked a direct and very specific question. They said, did anyone have documentation confirming that the chief had worked 40 hours during the periods reflected in the payroll records? Now, that question shifted the discussion from general explanations to something a little bit more concrete, right? Something that looked a lot more like evidence, because payroll systems show what someone was paid. They don't always show how the work was performed, right? Or what documentation supported the hours. From that moment forward, the investigation began focusing on whether records existed that could be they could verify the hours reflected in the payroll system. And that was going to be problematic. And the responses that followed during the meeting offered a revealing glimpse into how the situation inside City Hall was being explained at the time. It typically one-off.
the pressure the department was under as investigators continued their discussion during the May 10th meeting was city officials began describing the broader environment involving Lorain police at the time the payroll discussions and questions were emerging. And in order to understand that explanation, what was offered during the meeting, it helps kind of revisit that event that had placed the department under this public scrutiny. So earlier that year, as you guys all remember, I'm sure, the Lorain Police Department came under intense focus of a highly controversial incident involving the shooting of a dog named Dixie during a police encounter. Elliot Palmer shot this dog, and it quickly spiraled to a point where it went all across the United States, nationwide, and reportedly by the city, it was even sent out to Australia. Now, video of the incident circulated online. Animal advocacy groups got involved. Local residents organized protests. Within a short period of time, the situation had spread far beyond the city limits and had drawn national attention. So anyone who follows how stories move through social media understand how quickly these situations are going to escalate, and a single incident can become a symbol, and it did. News outlets began repeating the footage. Advocacy groups issue statements. People across the country who had never even heard of Lorain suddenly have an opinion about what happened on the street corner in Northeast Ohio. That was the environment the department was operating in all fairness. Inside the meeting, the investigators, the city officials pointed out to that moment as a period when the department was under extraordinary pressure. Now, this part I love. So, lazy dog. So, law director, Mr. Don Zaleski, told those present at this public meeting or this meeting of the trust of the government to investigate this, that the public just did not fully understand the strain that this situation had placed upon the police chief, James McCann, and that the department's leadership, right? And according to Mr. Zaleski, the chief was heavily involved in responding to the fallout from the incident and the wave of criticism that followed. Law Director Patrick Riley, he reinforced that explanation. Riley told investigators that he had personally spent time working alongside Police Chief James McCann during the aftermath of the dog shooting, helping manage the city's legal and public response. The situation required coordination between the police department and the law department and the city leadership as the story continued to gain attention. At one point during the discussion, Riley summarized the public reactions in blunt terms. He told my investigators that the city was essentially under attack from dog lovers. And whether that phrasing was fair or not is open to debate. But what matters is reflected how the city officials themselves were describing the public pressure surrounding the department at the time. The controversy was dominating the headlines. Residents were angry. The department was facing criticism not only locally, but from people who had no connection whatsoever to our city, to our state, other than they were seeing this online. And at the same time, something else was happening inside the department that investigators could focus on, or would later focus on. During portions of this period, the department was operating with an acting chief. And in police departments, this arrangement is not unusual, but when a chief is absent due to the travel, leave, or other responsibilities, a senior officer is designated to take the access, right? And act in his place for operational purposes. Now, the acting chief assumes responsibility for command decisions during that time, and under many department policies, may receive higher position pay while performing those duties. Now, sorry, I need to set up straight. In the Lorain Police Department, several captains were at times designated to fill that role when the chief wasn't physically present. The administrative detail became important once the investigators began compiling the payroll records and scheduling data, because when an acting chief is recorded in the system and paid at the chief's rate, it usually means the chief himself is not performing those duties during that period. The higher position reflects the temporary transfer of command responsibility. Remember that in the Army. You're in charge. If I get more money, you're in charge. But the payroll reports, investigators were examining, suggested that there were times when both things appeared to be happening at once. Captains were receiving higher position pay associated with acting chief responsibilities. At the same time, payroll entries still reflected compensation for the chief. The overlap didn't automatically prove anything improper. I mean, there are situations where the chief actually may still be working while delegating operational command for a particular shift or event. Administrative work, remote communications. Other duties can still occur while someone else is covering operational responsibilities. But those kind of overlaps appear in the data. Investigators naturally want to understand the underlying circumstances. And that's why the explanation about the dog shooting incident was raised during the meeting. City officials were essentially arguing that the department was operating under extraordinary circumstances, that the chief, they said, was actively dealing with a major public controversy that required time, coordination, and communication beyond the normal daily routine of the department. And in their view, that situation created a period where command responsibilities were shifting. Public attention was intense, and the chief was engaged in managing the crisis, even if he wasn't physically present for every shift, or in the city, or in the county, or apparently even in the damn state. But hey, I digress. He was in an area that he had no law enforcement powers. Again, if I go out of state, I can't practice. But hey, at the same time, that explanation was being offered. Investigators were examining payroll records and asking, a much more technical question. How are the hours being documented? Because public pressure may explain why a department was operating in crisis mode, but payroll systems still require documentation showing how work hours are recorded and verified. And that is the question investigators were looking at, trying to answer. And so they get into this calendar evidence, and they have a meeting at the prosecutor's office. And the discussion eventually moved away from general explanations and toward one thing investigators were really looking for, which was documentation. Payroll records show that someone was paid, and then scheduling systems can show how shifts were assigned. Then administrative explanations can dogs growling can describe why something may have happened, but investigators ultimately want to see the records that confirm the work that was performed, right? And at that point in the meeting, Police Chief James McCann produced what became the most tangible piece of documentation. Either then or later, I think he offered up his cell phone calendar. And according to the investigative summary prepared during the review, McCann opened his cell phone and showed investigators his personal calendar. The entries on that calendar, he explained, reflected the time he had spent dealing with the aftermath of the dog shooting controversy while he was out of state. During that period, McCann had been in Florida. That detail immediately became important to investigators because the payroll records they were examining reflected the chief being paid for work hours during that same time frame. Now, the chief's explanation was straightforward. Even though he was physically outside the city, he said he was still actively working. So he was in another state where he had no law enforcement powers whatsoever, and he was working. According to his description during the meeting, he was communicating with officials, responding to developments related to the incident, and managing aspects of the department's response while away. In other words, his position was that the work was being performed remotely. Calendar entries on his phone were presented as documentation supporting that explanation. Investigators, however, were not simply interested in seeing the calendar on the phone screen in the middle of a meeting. They wanted a record that could be reviewed later and compared with payroll data under examination, so they asked for a copy. Specifically, investigators requested that McCann provide the calendar entries so that they could examine the dates and times alongside the payroll records and scheduling information connected to the same period. McCann indicated that he would provide those records and entries, but explained that he wanted to remove personal information from the calendar before turning it over. That request is not unusual. Personal calendars often contain private entries unrelated to work, and redactions are commonly used when personal devices are involved in document production. The investigators agreed to that approach, and sometime later, the investigative team received a PDF file derived from the chief's phone calendar. Now, according to the summary, the entry contained documentation that reflected approximately 37 hours of work activity between July 3rd and July 10th of 2023. The entries were described as documenting time spent addressing matters connected to the dog shooting incident and the public response that followed. At that point, the calendar effectively became the primary documentation offered to support the payroll entries investigators had been reviewing. The fact raises an important question. For anyone examining the situation, that's because payroll systems inside a police department normally rely on internal documentation generated through the scheduling software, administrative approvals, and department reporting systems. But in this case, the key supporting documentation investigators received was not a department record, it was a personal calendar extracted from a cell phone of the person being investigated. And that distinction would become an important part of the story as the investigation moved forward. Now, this is going to bring us to our first little mini break. But again, as before, I'm not going to play ads this time. I'm going to play our first clip, which is the meeting at the prosecutor's office. So for those who haven't heard it, this one is the meeting at the prosecutor's office. It's a little bit long, not as long as the next one, but we're going to use this time to listen to it, and I may pop in and out and make comments as we go on this. But in the meantime, here it is. Enjoy.
Well, I can answer some questions in regards
Okay.
to LP.
Rich, what was your? Oh, you're gonna say it.
Okay, again, today is May 10th, 2023. This is for the City of Lorain incident. Present again is Investigator Greg Kopniski and also
Forensic Auditor Kara Yoder.
Garrett Longacre, investigator, Lorain County Prosecutor.
Lorain County Prosecutor J.D. Tomlinson.
Jim Birch, Chief of Staff, Lorain County Prosecutor.
Rich Resendes, Chief Operations Officer.
Is it Zenis?
Resendes?
Oh, not even close.
Resendenz.
Thank you very much.
You do better with Giuseppe. How about that?
I did. Wow.
Okay, and again, I just want to clarify, we received this complaint from Karen Shawver, who is the Lorain City Auditor.
Yes, sir.
And I spoke to her briefly on the phone, I think last week, just to clarify some things that in her email, it looks like there are going to be 3 separate complaints. And they all involve the city, not the county on any level.
Correct.
True.
Okay, the first one that she had told us was several employees in the utility and billing office and admin are getting excessive overtime payments for working through lunch and for higher position pay.
Okay, that case was brought to us to investigate. We felt that it should be investigated by the Lorain Police Department, so it's within their jurisdiction, and that has been forwarded to the Lorain Police Department. They're currently investigating that case.
We can reach out to them and find out if they want assistance with that, or if they want us to take it, or work it together.
Is there a specific person handling that?
I don't know if it's been assigned that out yet. Part of our policy here is that when we receive an original initial complaint of criminal activity, we look at the jurisdiction that complaint is founded in, and we give the right to first refusal to that agency. So we contact that agency and we say, hey, we have this complaint. What do you want to do with it? Do you want to investigate it? Do you want us to investigate it? Do you want to work together?
Right.
And they have option A, B, and C.
Okay.
In this case, they took option A, and that was a decision made by the chief of police.
Okay, and they're saying that they will work it.
Correct.
Okay. And again, we will contact them and just say, what do you need?
It's kind of what we do, Rich, too. We kind of give them the, you want to help? Want no help? Do you want to work it
That's how
together?
it was with Mayor Whitfield. We also reach out to her like, whoa, no, you can have this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when Karen comes in, I will, do we want to hang on to that paperwork?
She's already
Yeah,
been
I'd
advised
say
that
we-
it was referred over to Lorain.
Yeah. She might have it. I mean, if she has it, yeah, we'll take it, because if anything, at least we have it if we have it, and then we can.
Okay, well, I don't know if we need to
Discard it if
forward
we
it to
don't.
Lorraine.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's some hostility between Shawver and Chief McCann.
Oh, okay. Good to
So
know.
hence a lot of this documentation here.
Okay.
And
Okay.
he tried to have her indicted a couple different times, had us look at stuff, and she was cleared.
Yeah.
So there's some hostility between them. So she may not be happy that he's investigating her complaint, because she may think he's going to squash it. Who knows?
What's the police chief's name again?
Jim McCann.
Oh. Okay. I'm just realizing that
Small world here.
he's the
Right.
So
Okay.
it's an option too.
Yep.
Sorry, it took me a little while to get
So
there.
don't call
but-
him up for help on his.
Exactly. That's exactly. I was like, oh.
So number 2, again, is with the police chief, apparently taking off Fridays, and his captains would fill it in, and
Supervisory pay.
in my day, we call it shift differential or supervisory, OIC pay.
Yep.
Okay.
Higher position.
Yep.
And that
Where does
compli-
that stand?
I'm sorry?
Where does that stand right now? That's going to be.
That's you guys.
Gonna be
You got the
us?
hot potato. So basically the equivalent of the chief takes off, still collects chief's pay, OIC pay, and he's paying the next senior guy, the captain, to get senior pay. So you have every other Friday or whatnot, they're getting, 2 chiefs are getting paid when there's only 1 chief working.
And from what we've been told from the little paperwork we received, he's not putting in for a personal day, comp
Correct.
day.
Training time, none of that.
And again, as dumb as this sounds, we're sure he's not working a 4 10-hour work week?
No.
Correct.
Okay. Again, dumb question, but I just
You gotta ask it, I get it.
Do you?
gotta make sure.
I don't know that for a fact.
I don't know for sure. That may be his claim, but we don't know that to be true.
We'll double check.
Is he, I don't, is
I've never
His
heard that he
payroll
had.
sheets, if that's the case, I would expect his pay sheets to show 4 10-hour days
Right.
and
Yeah.
then nothing for that day.
Right.
That's not what it reflects.
Yeah. Did you guys get information? I know that we have some information from Karen. And did anybody get information or know what the process is there? Like, do they fill out timesheets? Is there
Yes.
something
Go ahead,
like?
Rich, you gonna talk to this.
They have their auditing payroll system is called Telestaff.
Telestaff?
Telestaff. And Telestaff, all the officers, all promoted officers put in their time. You input your time first, and then you deduct your hours from Telestaff. So to give you an example, they know I'm working day shift these days for the rest of the year.
Okay.
I want a day off. I go into Telestaff and I say, I want Tuesday, April 6th off. The Telestaff knows the time that I have in there on my banks, and it goes to the sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and they approve it, and I get the day off.
Do we know who approves the chief's stuff? Is anybody over him? Does anybody know that?
Yeah, well, yes and no. The chief signs off on payroll, or he's supposed to sign off on payroll for the whole department. Every 2 weeks payroll comes through, he's supposed to sign off on it, it goes up to the auditor, right? I don't know that if that's being conducted, because we asked Karen Shaw for that. She didn't know that, the answer to that. And we didn't delve any further, because once you start delving into who signs off on
Yeah.
payroll, cat's out of the
then
bag.
everybody knows.
Yeah.
And then Greg, as far as the stuff we gave you that originally it has these timesheets.
Yeah.
This stack here, Karen Schaller went through and was able to document. You have a copy of this. as
I was
well.
going to
Any
ask. I
training-
assumed that was her.
This is her. Yeah. So he took off on a Friday, and Roger Watkins got Chiefs pay that day. If it corresponded that Roger was working Chiefs pay because the chief was off doing training somewhere, then that's good.
Absolutely.
But when the chief's sitting at home making Chiefs pay and they're paying somebody else Chiefs pay, that's the problem.
Does it show that he was off at training someplace?
I have those dates here.
I believe I think she indicated it does, and then she must have gone through because she would be the one paying for travel in those conferences.
Right.
Do we know? I had a case, a very small, long time ago, but the chief was like padding hours. It was a theft of time case, and we had, because again there was no timesheets, but he would take a duty turn. So like we would be able to check like the call logs, dispatch logs, things like that. If they dispute, oh well, I was working that day. I'm like, well, there wasn't anything on your dispatch logs. Do you know if that is a similar thing here? If we were to need that, would that be utilized here?
Well, you can verify, and here's how, I guess. So I'm the chief, and I'm saying I'm working from home. Well,
I have a child that's on lots of medication right
Oh,
now.
no
and
problem.
Normally I'm home.
No problem.
I'm saying I'm working from home, I'm the chief.
Okay.
Did I log on remotely to my desktop. Did I perform any chief's duties other than just staying home and I guess nobody called me for 8 hours?
I don't think you're going to see that. And the reason I say that is because he takes Fridays off because he didn't believe his pay was sufficient.
Okay.
He was aggravated as hell that the captains are making more than he, and so he declared that he would be taking Fridays
And was
off.
pretty vocal about it.
And did anybody say you can't do that because you're not working 40 hours a week, or?
I don't know. I guess my initial thought was, did he think he's salaried and that does you know what I mean? I don't
He
know.
was salaried.
I say
at
that
one
would
point,
be another
but he
thing
turned
that
it.
we need to double check to see salaried, unsalaried. What does the contract say? What
He's
all that
hourly
stuff?
though, right? Is what
He's
we've
an hourly.
According
covered.
to Karen, and
Now.
Karen can verify
Now.
that.
Yeah,
Through ordinance
yeah. She did give us an
and
ordinance.
through contract, she indicated he was set hourly. He was hourly, so you can verify that.
He was salaried and he complained because he thought he was losing money out on not getting paid for doing extra stuff. So then he went to hourly. And once he went to hourly, he basically screwed himself because now he's
That's correct.
not here on Fridays.
We can tell you, Faber would be jealous of the chief's paycheck.
Really, it means I'm really going to be jealous.
Yeah.
When you see it, you are going to wonder.
Is he getting overtime?
No, he's not loud, isn't he?
I think he does because.
Does he?
Because if he's hourly now, he would be eligible.
Oh, okay.
He'd be eligible,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So you were saying that if he's home, saying that he's working, logging onto his computer.
So if he's performing chief's functions, right, and Jim is now the senior captain and he's now getting higher position pay.
Yeah.
Guess who has to approve his higher position pay? I do.
Yeah,
So am I working or am I not working?
yeah.
You can't have
Right.
your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, my thought is the only exception would be if he is attending something on city behalf
Right.
or training.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Make
I
sure
don't
we're
know
on the
if
same
that,
page.
and again, I don't know that that falls under a legitimate excuse if you're just home. Yeah.
I don't think
And
so.
if you look at his salary, he started in December of 19. He was making every Friday. He was making $405. Well, now he's $807. Yep. Good. I'll wait for you to get a big mouthful.
Wow, thank you for that.
807
Wow.
per day.
Okay.
That's $4,000 a week times 52. Now, I don't think
Sick,
Keith
isn't it?
Faber's making that kind of money.
Buddy, you came to the wrong place, Greg.
It was never like this before.
Yeah.
What's that?
I think they are.
Can you send somebody down to help Jen? She has some trays of stuff to pick up.
Yeah.
She's down by the front.
Are we going on the chief thing to go to number 3 or no?
Yeah, for now, yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, I can talk and type. Go ahead.
Okay.
Or you can talk and I can type.
Number 3 on the complaint was the law department appears to have employees paid for full-time work but only work part-time. The auditors noticed this. Do we know where this stands at all? Or
That's the first I've heard of that
Never heard of
allegation.
that before.
Was that given to you by Karen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she never mentioned that I can recall. It was just
My
the two
knowledge,
issues.
Not
with
in our
the-
meetings.
Yeah.
There are 2 assistants, right? Mallory and
Joe Levesque, is it?
And Rocky.
Oh, is it Rocky? Yes.
Mallory and
He's
Rocky. I
asking,
think they
there's
were.
a third allegation from Karen
Yeah,
about
they
law
do.
director
Right.
staff
Yeah,
that
they
were
do.
part-time but getting
Yeah, she
full-time
does.
benefits.
That's
So you didn't know that
right.
either, okay.
Okay, and when I was texting with her yesterday, I asked her to, I don't even have names, dates, hours, so she's supposed to be bringing that.
Yeah, I'm unaware of that one.
So, okay, so we're not aware of that. Okay, and I'm sorry, then if you had anything else on the chief?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right, everybody good if I shut us down? Sure. You okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys don't have a problem with us doing that law director or law staff stuff, right?
No.
No.
Well, there you have it. That's our first audio file that we were sent by the special investigator. So we're going to start talking about the bigger timeline now. Now, this is where the story begins to shift a little because the calendar explanation only addresses a very small slice of the timeline that the investigators were examining. The entries that were eventually produced from the chief's phone covered a limited period of time. They focused on several days in July and described work activity connected to the fallout from the dog shooting incident. Now, for purposes of that meeting, the calendar was presented as documentation explaining how the chief may have been performing work duties while he was physically outside the city. But the records investigators were reviewing did not begin and end in a single week, right? The payroll records activity across months and years. Scheduling systems capture every shift that's entered into the system. Administrative approvals, compensation categories create a long paper trail that stretches far beyond one controversy or one explanation, and that becomes the bigger issue. When those different records begin to be examined together, right? Something interesting starts to happen. When you start to place them all next to each other, you see a pattern. And you can start lining up those dates in the payroll system with the dates in the scheduling system software, and you can compare when the higher rates or the position pay was issued to command staff and with when the chief was recorded as working. You can also examine the classification of the position itself. Now, whether it was treated as hourly or salary during certain periods, how that classification affects the way the hours are documented. When those pieces are examined one at a time, each record might seem routine. But when they're laid side by side across an entire timeline, they begin to form a much larger picture. And the larger picture is where the investigation really begins to expand. And because the week document and the week they documented in the chief's cell phone calendar is only a very small portion of that overall record. The payroll systems, the scheduling systems, the personnel records, and the administrative policies that govern how these systems operate extend across, much longer periods. Now, this is where the deeper questions begin, and this is exactly where the story begins moving to the next phase of this investigation. It's, for those of you following the written series, this is the point where we start moving into what will be part 2 of this investigation, where the records are examined across the full timeline rather than focusing on a single explanation offered during one meeting. And for those of you watching the podcast live tonight, you're about to get a preview of the next chapter, because once you start lining up the payroll entries, the scheduling records, and the documentation that exists across the full timeline, that story begins to get a very different feel and look than it did when the investigators were looking at it just 1 week on a cell phone calendar. Now, we're going to go through the next audio next. And before we do that, though, I'll do a little preview of what's coming. So the payroll timeline, one of the things that the investigators do in public corruption cases, they reconstruct the timeline using the payroll records. Every payroll entry corresponds to a date. Every date corresponds to compensation. When those records are lined up side by side, you can reconstruct exactly how the system recorded work activity. And sometimes the numbers tell a story. And in the case of the payroll timeline, it appears to involve dozens of dates. And if those dates correspond to work entries that cannot be verified through scheduling records or documented activity, investigators begin looking at deeper questions. Those questions are not limited to the police department, because during the same meeting, investigators also raise questions involving documentation inside another office, the law department. Now, before I play this for you, and this is kind of a long one, so I may skip through some sections, but I want to put a few things in the context here. So the law department stuff's kind of funny because, I've been picking away at the Lorain Law Department, a lot of these law departments for quite a while, especially Joe Levesque, because he works in so many different areas. And we're going to discuss that in the upcoming article that'll be probably coming out tomorrow, as well as later in this podcast. And, there's in this, it's discussed that she believes he's a part-time employee, or they're saying he's a full-time employee, but he's only working part-time hours. There's some issues here that need to be addressed. There's also, listen real close when you listen to this video, because you're going to hear and I'll probably stop in these sections and make some commentary, because there's points of this video or this audio file that really need to sink in for you to understand what we're getting ready to do in section 2. But I want to point out, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, is that the main problem that we have with all of this stuff is, so the auditor did their investigation, and and then the sheriff did their investigation. Now, obviously, the sheriff, someone was asking me earlier, like, well, what the investigation come up with? Well, obviously, it came up with nothing because the sheriff said they went with the auditor. Both of them agreed that there wasn't enough to go off of. They said it was salary. The problem is that when you look at his personnel files, like I did, and I have those, the city of Lorain likes to accidentally release things completely unredacted anyway. But I know his personnel changes, and so I understand when his money changed, when he started changing. And the problem is when you listen to the audio recording, he kind of screwed himself, right? He says he was salary by code. But then he started getting pissy and mad, and he was like, the captains are making, I'm doing all this extra work and blah, blah, blah. So he was throwing a hissy fit, and they made him hourly. And then somebody was watching, okay? That's all I'm going to say. I have to believe that the files that I turned over to the sheriff were all of the hard files that Shaver had printed up of this. Well, somebody had and had them. And then I have to think it was either Shaver or Watkins, one of the captains, put this packet together and mailed it to me right around the time that they started ignoring it. And then I sat on it, right? Because I didn't know what to do with it. It had named a lot of big people, and at the time I didn't know even how all these people were connected. And I was really focused on dealing with just McCann. And so I didn't know how to handle this. So I sat on it for a while, and then I turned it over to Scharschmidt, and then Scharschmidt stabbed me in the back. My lawyer at the time said, you can trust these guys at the sheriff. And I didn't have a reason not to, because I'd helped get them elected. But then Jack Hall's little investigator, Scharschmidt, stabbed me right in the back. And then he, Michi, and the sheriff turned around and called me a liar through Janisek, or the records clerk, because she said, Janiskiro, sorry, it came back that they said I never gave them anything. They called me a liar. I was like, I know what I gave you, motherfuckers. Like, I had it. I had pictures of it. I took photographs of it before I took it over to you, along with dates. And yet you don't have it. And I insinuated at the time that I got rid of it. I didn't want it. It was poison, right? And I gave you the only copies I had. Come on, guys. Of course I was fucking lying. And so I was like, all right. So, I do have copies of that. And when I laid that stuff out, what the sheriff and the auditor didn't look at, didn't want to look at, chose not to look at, is when you take whatever this person who took the time to documented and sent to me. They sent a letter with it. It was looked like it was typed. But the letter detailed every date, every hour, every captain, every minute, every second. It laid it out for the investigators easier than the Ethics Commission expects it, right? Like, the Ethics Commission expects you to do all their work for them. We need to send us in, the evidence and write the report and arrest them. Do all of the work for us, and then we'll take the credit. But no, it was laid out for them perfectly, because it was given to me and I couldn't understand it because I'm not in payroll. I read it. I read what it said. I understood there was something about payroll. It was like, okay, so some guy got paid more while another guy worked. All right. I understood the theory, because in loss prevention once we had a guy that he was our best salesman. He sold suits. Well, he worked 8 hours a day on Sundays, but Sundays the store closed at 6. And so when he came in, he would leave at 7 when the store closed, or 6:37, whatever, 6:30, and then 30 minutes before he'd be there to open. So he just wouldn't clock in until he started working the floor, not before, which, by state law, it's problematic, because then he could get hurt and we could have an issue. But the bigger issue was this: he wasn't doing it because of that. Like, he wasn't doing it because he wanted to work for free. The way his commission worked was he made X number of dollars when he was working per hour, and however many sales per hour he had based off what he got for commission. So for that 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after, if he was clocked in, that's time he can't sell. So he just wouldn't do it. Now, then he calculated up just like they did, over years, weeks, months, whatever. and you come up with a number, and it becomes astronomical when he's a top sales guy, how much he's costing you. In the end, they let it go because it was just too difficult to deal with, but the truth was there. So I understood what they were talking about here. And I understood whoever brought it up. Probably, maybe they had a little bit of an axe to grind, but it seems like everybody here has an axe to grind. I'm pissed at McCann. Other people hate my guts. People come in here and make fun of me because I got beat up at a bar. I mean, Zach, honestly, you think I give a shit? You think that's the first time that's happened? I'm 52 years old, man. I got a big mouth. I've been beat up at a lot of bars. I beat a lot of people up at bars. I just stopped fighting. You don't win them all. You don't lose them all. Does it look like I'm really worried about it? Because I'm not. They can play that game all day long. Physical violence is you're going to win. I'm disabled. I'm not going to fight back. So, but this, whether you like me or dislike me, this information's factual. This is, members of the government speaking out. And yeah, maybe Karen Schauber had an axe to grind against McCann. Maybe McCann definitely had an axe to grind against her and her family. Maybe in the grand scheme of things, everybody's tied together and yucky. But when you listen to this, if you listen to it without thinking about any of that, and you just listen to it with open ears and open eyes, kind of like when you watch the Ray Carry-On slamming the door and chest bumping me with my voice taken out because you're already programmed to hate it. But just watch this next section or listen to it, and I'll stop as we go. But we're going to address that a little bit more when we get to the other end, but this one is a little bit of a longer one. So like I said, I may skip through some parts, but this is Karen Schauber, and this is the detail, right? This is the stuff you got to listen to if you really want to pick up on the idiosyncrasies of what's being reported and how it's being reported. But again, the packet I was sent literally covers the stuff that the sheriff and the auditor say don't exist because they went off McCann's calendar and they went off like a 1 week period where they should have been tracking this entire segment. And once I got the auditor's report, I truly understood the value of the paperwork that I had that the sheriff's office and Scharschmidt and them took from me and never gave back. I truly understood the value of having the envelope, having it all together in one spot, that chain of evidence, and they stole that ability from me, and I'll never share my documents with the sheriff again or the police, ever. I did that because I didn't know what to do with this, and it seemed like no one was listening. My attorney, I'd given it to him, and he had contacted Lorain, and no one seemed to be doing anything. And so the sheriff got it, and all they did was regurgitate whatever this report said. Now, they said they got all this information from the auditor, so they got all the same information I got, and I just got this morning, and I've done everything I've done with it. Why couldn't they do it? But listen to this. This one's I listened to this and it blew my mind. If you can't listen to it all, you got to come back or whatever. You can go catch it on YouTube and download the transcripts. But it's going to be interesting to see. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little more about the law department and the contents of this audio file.
Today is May 10th, 2023. This is in regards to the City of Lorain complaint 13751. Present is investigator Aaron Christopher. Also present is
Forensic Auditor Kara Yoder.
And Karen Schauber, Lorain City Auditor.
Karen, just so we're all on the same page, I have a copy of, it looks like the original complaint you sent us on April 14th, and I just want to make sure I'm on the same page with you.
Okay.
Number one was in regards to the city having several employees in the utilities billing office and admin departments getting excessive overtime payments for working through their lunch hours and higher position pay.
Yes.
Okay. We have just been informed in regards to that complaint that is currently being investigated by the
Turned over to the police department.
What we will do as an auditor's office, we will contact them and offer them any assistance that they may require from us.
Okay.
Again, it appears like the policy here is like the policy everywhere else, where you usually go with where did the alleged crime occur. They have jurisdiction. And they're given a choice of, do you want to do it yourself? Do you want some help? Or do you want it independent?
Okay.
Okay. So we agreed that was the first complaint, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And we will do a similar thing. Do you want us just to take it over? Do you want us to work together with you, or you just want us to stay out?
Okay.
Yep.
We will go to
So
them
we'll
at that point.
contact them. The number 2 complaint that I have listed is the police department. The police chief, it appears, is taking off Fridays, and then a captain fills in and gets paid alternate officer in charge pay or at a higher rate.
Yes.
Okay. What would you like us to know in additional to that?
Okay, so basically, I don't know what information you have been provided with already. What happened that brought this to light was I received a public records request. It was hand delivered to my office, given to one of my staff members. It was just in an envelope, and it requested all the captain's payments of higher position pay from the period of December 2nd, 2019 through the present. It was given to me on February 28th of 2023. And it says I request payroll documents related to higher position pay for any police captain in Lorain Police Department starting December 2nd. I also request payroll records that indicate the Chief of Police of Lorain Police Department was paid regular hours on the same days the captains received higher rate of pay. It says, please exclude any days in which the chief of police was on vacation or off on other approved leave. The citizens group of which I am part of believes Chief J. McCann took days off without using his bank time, which caused 2 officers to receive chief's pay. All it did was have a name and a phone number. So I ran the reports that were requested. On March 1st, I called the number and indicated that I had the information for him. I typed a letter saying that the payroll reports were for 3 employees who served as captain, and also the payroll reports for the chief that showed his regular time being paid.
I'm going to show you something now, which is what we have. I'm assuming, is this the public records that
Yes.
you gave them? This is what we have for like the payroll reports for the 3 people.
Yes.
So that's what you provided to the
Correct.
person. Okay.
And I know, Greg, you asked for the Leslie Palmer one. This was the only hours of higher position that he paid, and I honestly do not believe he was the captain at the time, because he went from lieutenant to captain in a short time. So these dates that they asked me about, I ran it, and he had higher position pay, but I think he was actually in the lieutenant's position and received captain's pay. And that's what was originally given. So the majority of the 100 days being paid at the higher rate were for Roger Watkins and Michael Failing.
Okay.
Sharon, is he stopped taking Fridays off?
Well, since this this started in 2019 when he became the chief, but he also switched to working 10-hour work days and only work 4 days a week. But I don't believe he is giving them higher position on the days he's not off or when he's not working. Okay. These are just days that he's not there, and he is letting them put in for the higher position pay. I don't believe, because what you'll see in those reports is it was 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, then all of a sudden it turned to 10 hours. And I don't believe on the days that he is not there because of working 40 hours, 10 hour, 4 days a week, he's not giving them higher position on those days. Okay. And I don't know, I think one of them might have worked the 10-hour shift with him, so they kind of alternated. If he was off on Monday, the other captain worked on Monday and was off on Friday. They kind of alternated, so they kind of would get 4-day work weeks. But what I understand the process to be is they have what's called Telestaff. It's a Chronos software project. I don't know, you're familiar with that? It's a scheduling program, which basically they set up their schedule for about a year in advance, and all the officers have all their schedules. They know exactly when they're going to work, when they switch, shifts and everything, and that is just basically used for scheduling. And the schedule is set in there, and then the officers themselves can go in and change things if they're going to request a day off, or if they're going to call in sick, or if they have to work overtime. They mark their time in there. And then what is supposed to occur is the officer in charge or whoever is above them is supposed to say, yes, he was working overtime, or yes, he didn't show up for briefing until 6:30 instead of 6. So they are supposed to keep track and then approve those hours in Telestaff. Then Telestaff is managed by the payroll clerk in the police department, and then she uploads the file into our payroll system that has been approved by the officers in charge, the police chief, and then it goes to the safety service director. So we don't have access to this Telestaff software. It's just used by the police department. It's not accessible to the auditor's office. So we basically, in our payroll system, get hours that have been approved and accepted by a multitude of people.
So safety service director would be the final sign off?
Yes.
Is that who signs off on the chief?
Yes.
Okay. So Telestaff, can I just make sure I'm understanding?
Sure.
Telestaff is basically their scheduling program. They make changes in there to their schedules, leave requests. The senior officer is approving whomever is putting that request in. That will then go through and generate the payroll file from the payroll clerk in the police department that then runs up. Is that report approved by the safety director ultimately before it comes to you?
Yes.
And then you guys are running payroll off of this payroll report that is kind of generating from their time in Telestaff.
Yes. But it's supposed to be approved by the appropriate authorities in the department. And from my understanding, the captains are permitted to have higher position pay only in the event that the chief is not there. So he's approving it. And also what came to light after this public records request, there was another request from a captain because in about June or July of last year, they gave a very substantial pay increase to the police chief. And because it went retroactive to January 1st, they felt that they should have gotten the pay rate increase because as they received the higher position pay from January to July, they should have gotten his pay.
Okay, just real quick. Like I said, I was a pause to point out some stuff. Yeah, I, as you do when you're listening to things for a second, third, and fourth time, I just picked up on that. So she says it was from a captain again. My original feeling was that packet I got was from Watkins, and it was after he left to go to Sheffield. And she got it right around the same time as I got it, possibly give or take a few months. And so I just feel like, I mean, again, you're talking about the captains were actually complaining that his subordinates were complaining about this. This came from them. This came from inside the police department.
He got a retroactive pay increase for. So then I had to go back and figure out all the hours that they worked and give them a retro pay. It turned out to be about $3,000 or so for the two captains. And so then that made me think, what's going on here that he's got all this time, but yet he has all these regular hours? It doesn't make sense to me.
Karen, can I ask a question? Imagine for a moment that the chief has taken 100 Fridays off. Would each one of those weeks, would he have logged 4 10-hour days?
No.
Okay.
No, because he didn't start doing the 10-hour days until it's on the reports and actually...
After his raise?
Probably. Yes.
Yeah, I think he got about $30,000.
Oh, I
He had a
see.
huge
It
raise.
looks like the 8-hour days went through December 3rd of 21. December 6th of 21 was when they start at 10. Do you know who would have had to approve that? Would that be in the
Who would have approved what? Changing the
the
shift?
schedule shift?
I would assume it was in the safety service director, yes. And there's been several people now doing that. I believe the fire chief does it, and there's other departments that just started doing it without any like approval process by the Lorain City Council or anybody. Like it's just been done through their offices. And I don't necessarily think it's always on Friday. Like it's other days. Like it's definitely other days.
Oh, okay.
But I think that's how it kind of started. Like I'm just going to start taking off Friday, and then I think it just. And my concern after seeing all these things, so it's almost 100 days. In 2020, obviously we had COVID. It was shut down. There was no travel. There was no meetings in person. Everything was done by Zoom. So he basically should have been in the office working, or if he was, you know, I mean, like lots of times, like you're doing a seminar, or like today, you're out of your office, so someone else might be getting higher position pay in your office because you're here. But in 20 and most of 21, there was no travel, there was no training, there was no seminars, so he would not have been going to that to say, well, I was just doing a seminar, so that's why they got higher position pay. So that was my first thought. Well, wait a minute. We do keep track of the travel requests and vouchers and approvals in our office as well. There weren't very many. I did run the reports for that. I don't know if I brought it, but there was just a handful of days that he was scheduled to go on travel. Now, whether he went or not, I don't know. But also my concern is, I don't know in the government, that the state government, if you get this, but when you retire, all these hours on your books you get paid out.
Yeah.
So if you have all these vacation hours that you're not taking because you're using regular hours when you're on vacation, then he's going to get a substantial payout when he leaves. So that is just another thing that concerns me.
And that's something I didn't
Can I confirm with you? And again, I apologize.
That's why he asked the
You
patient.
started off by saying, I had written down December 2nd, 2019 to the present. But then on the complaint, it says December of 2020 to the present. So what was?
So I'm sorry, that is wrong. He became the chief on December 2nd of 2019.
Okay.
And that is when the person, this public records request, and you could, I'll be happy to give this to you, asked for those dates. And
Okay.
I'm
So
sorry.
your
that was-
concern
that was-
is starting from 2019?
Yes.
Not 2020?
Right.
Okay.
December 2nd, 2019.
Yes.
Okay,
I'm
and again,
sorry.
I apologize, I just saw a
Okay.
difference in there.
Okay,
and
I'm
I
sorry. That was,
wasn't sure if I,
I feel like I've read this somewhere, so apologize if it's redundant. But did he come? Was he already in the department, or did he come from the outside?
he was already in the department.
So now he is logging 4 10-hour days a week.
Yes.
Okay.
and when did that start, again, roughly?
I just looked. It says it's December. Hold on, I just had it here.
It was probably the end of 21, I think. Or
December
It's
6th
December 6th, 21.
is when he started 4 10-hour days.
10-hour days. Looks like he's working Monday. Well, originally it was Monday through Thursday, and I don't know if that then shifts or not. Now, to your knowledge, I'm assuming that then the captain would be. So if he's working Monday through Thursday, maybe the captain's working Tuesday through Friday.
yes.
And did I understand correctly that your understanding is that the captain is not on that Friday putting in extra duty pay for the chief?
Not that I am aware. It's only on days that he's supposed to, his regularly scheduled time.
Would be
that
to be
he's doing
there,
it.
and then he
Yes.
has to leave. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I don't know about those 10-hour days. I just can't feature it.
And you said you don't know if that was approved, went through
I
council
do
or
not-
anything?
I know it wasn't, it didn't go through a council because we just happened to like stumble upon it when we saw the payrolls coming through with 10 hours instead of 8. So
I mean, does he work 7 to 5?
I have no clue.
8 to 6? I don't think so. You know, I mean, I'm just guessing.
I from what I believe, I know I've had phone calls or emails that are very early in the morning, like 7 a.m., 6 a.m. So whether he works 6 to 4,
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's lots of times I leave work and I go by there's no cars there. So they're gone. It's like I was kind of thinking it would be maybe till 6 o'clock at night or something. So maybe if he works from 6 to 4.
Or he
But-
might say, I work 2 hours at home.
Right.
Who knows?
Yeah.
On any of this pay stuff, you mentioned working from home. On a pay sheet or anything, would it show a difference between working from home or working actually at the station in his office? Is there like a different code or symbol that says I work from home compared to I worked in the office?
Not in our payroll system. I would assume in the Telestaff software, there is a place for notes that they would say something like that, just to protect themselves. I mean, I certainly would. I mean, and I know, like, in my office, there is no, like, overtime, or there's nothing given. Like, my employees just don't work overtime. They would come and say, Karen, I have to do W-2s. Can I work overtime? Or something like that. And I would say, yes, I would approve it. And I would know that, you know, my chief deputy wouldn't be getting higher position pay because I was off on vacation unless we discussed it and she's doing my work, you know, because she obviously has her own work. If there's times where she needs to represent me as the auditor, it would be something I would definitely approve. And from what I understand, those captains are only permitted to get higher position pay when it is approved and it's to the knowledge of the chief.
One clarification, these reports that you gave us, this is the payroll system reports, correct?
Yes.
Your payroll system,
Yes.
not the Telestaff
Correct.
reports, okay. And is this how it comes to you? Like, is this what they're printing out?
No, they upload their file.
But this
So
is not it though,
No.
correct? So does it interface automatically
Yes.
or do you have to enter it?
They upload it interfaces to our payroll system.
Do you still have access to those reports if we were to need them, or that's something we could get from them if we were to need them?
You would probably have to get it to them, from them.
Okay. I assume it's likely the same information that's on this report, but because you guys aren't hand entering it, it manually goes.
Yes.
Interfaces through the actual payroll system. Do you guys find that there are errors that kick out in that process, or frequently, or is it a pretty smooth process that once it transfers over, you don't have to deal with clarification?
On that part, I know there's reports. Go.
Sorry, real quick, before you guys leave, you and Greg, if you can stop in this corner office here, see
Yeah.
Rich on your way out.
Oh, sure.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know there's reports that are run by my office that are like exception reports.
Sure.
So she runs those first and takes a look to see if there's like, you know, in our office, they work 80 hours. So if somebody had only 76, she'd be like, why didn't they have 80? And
Okay.
so she does that as part of her biweekly processes. And I believe in the last couple pays, there were still instances of him getting regular hours and the captains getting higher position pay. So it's not like he doesn't do it anymore.
If we don't have the highest paid police chief in the state, I would be shocked.
It's very close. I think he's even higher than Columbus. I mean, there's 100 and now we're at about 110 officers.
Yeah.
So
City of
It-
85,000.
it was a substantial increase that they gave him us. So, but that's not my doing. I don't have a vote in the
You're not on the
matter.
council.
In regards to number 2 on your complaint with the police chief, Kara's okay.
Keep
What
going.
other paperwork did you bring for us? Anything else?
The only thing I am giving you is the original public records request, my cover letter. I knew you had already said you had those reports that were given to
Yeah.
the prosecutor's office. And then I did give you the 2 emails that were talking about the captains getting the higher position pay rate increase retroactive to the first of the year, just so you have that as part of it.
Okay.
I don't know if there's anything else you need. This one was
Okay.
pretty much simple, like was cut and dried to me, seeing that it was hours paid. He's supposed to be there working. He shouldn't have been giving higher position, or I mean, I suppose, it's a public record request, but could the captains have put in wrong information? I don't think so, because the chief shouldn't have approved it.
Yeah, they
if
have to approve
it's
it,
that
so
way.
they'll-
I mean, the inference in the public records request was that the chief was doing something wrong. That was what whoever the public records request was from was saying. So that's where your mind goes.
In regards to the leave accruals and balances, is that something that is maintained by your payroll system or their system at the police department, their Telestaff stuff?
They have it in Telestaff, but we also have it in our system.
Okay. I'm trying to think. Or if you know, I might have to talk to the payroll clerk. I think at some point we will need to have like a leave accrual report, like showing, for a period of time what balance he started with, and then like what his leave requests are that was taken and how it was deducted.
Okay.
Anything else on number 2?
I don't think so. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
Oh, let me give you my. You can just email this to
Okay.
me.
Okay. Thank you.
And then I think I also will probably want that from Telestaff too, just to compare. It might just have different information too. Do you know who the payroll clerk is in the police department?
Yes, her name is Kelly Zakrysic. Zakr.
Like spell it to look at it?
Honestly, I don't know. It's got an R and a J and S.
I will
but I can
phonetically
get
spell it and
Okay.
figure it out. How's that?
In Lorain, there are a lot of people with more consonants.
Yes.
My maiden name is Rybarsik with CZYK.
Yes. Mhm. Payroll clerk. When this public records request came in, to your knowledge, they were requesting it from your office. Do you know if they requested it from the police department?
I do know that.
Does your office work closely with Kelly because she's?
Yes.
Has she mentioned any kind of concerns, complaints with your office at all?
Not that I'm aware of. She deals mostly with my payroll clerk
Yeah,
directly.
listen. Would you have access to? I know some of the stuff we got was a part of the policy manual. It looks like probably stuff that was what you thought was applicable to this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have access to, or can you refer us to where we can get the entire policy manual that will show like dates? Like for example, we would need, if he became chief in December 2nd of 2019, we would want any policies and changes that have occurred since that time, so we know like what policy is applicable to a specific time period.
So would it be the collective bargaining agreements, or
We would
is
definitely
that-
want the CBA for them.
Okay.
Well, he wouldn't be union,
So
but
it's really weird what his ordinance.
I
You
noticed
see
that.
all it basically says is he gets the same economic benefits
As
as
the
the
agreement.
police.
So yes, we
men,
would
and then
want
you need
that.
And then there's like a policy book.
Which I'm assuming, is this from the policy manual, or would that be from the collective bargaining agreement?
That
Do you know?
that is the manager's ordinance, which that I don't know where that came
Yeah, I don't
from.
either.
Like that's something that we have in our office, but let me it's
Yeah,
all
feel free to-
managers' information.
you can-
Yeah, so we have the police union, the fire union, the laborers union. We have a manager's ordinance and the non-bargaining employees ordinance, but those aren't like union contracts. They're just not. They're non-bargaining unit employees, so they're just covered by an ordinance. That's a manager's ordinance. I don't know how you received that because I didn't give it to anybody. But
To your knowledge, the police chief and the captains are not ruled by that ordinance,
No.
correct? Okay.
no, they have a separate ordinance specifically for the police chief and the one special captain.
And I assume that's this. Is that correct?
Yes. And then there's also one from 2022 when they gave him the increase.
Which I don't have that.
Okay.
So if I could get it looks like this is from 16, and it's for the policing captain. Now, I also have in here something about the fire chief ordinance, and I'm wondering if maybe it was just like a mistake where it got sent that instead of the updated one.
Okay.
And we were just kind of handed a big file,
Well-
so it said scan.
The only thing I can think of in that regards is some of the stuff that you sent me was double-sided. So maybe that's.
Maybe it was just on the
another
back side,
side.
maybe.
I
That I don't
didn't
know.
send any of those reports.
The ordinance.
I didn't
Okay.
send anything at this
Yeah,
point yet,
we
so I
got-
don't know. The only thing I did was do the thing
Those
online
reports
about
and
the fraud issue.
Yeah.
issue.
So whenever our bosses got like the complaint, which they got stuff maybe even from the investigators here, they just didn't tell us like, oh, this came from
Okay.
Right.
the auditor,
Okay.
this came from. So we try to like figure that out just in case there's ever questions. Now I think if the ordinances are online though, I can look for that. Unless it's easy. If
think
it's,
it is.
yeah, if it's
Yeah.
easy for you, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing. And to your knowledge, there's nothing else that would govern the pay of the chief and the captain than those ordinances. Is there an overall policy manual just for all county employees or city employees?
They are working on one at the current date. I know the police department has a specific one that they had a vendor pay. I think it's called CopLogix, if I can recall. That they actually have their own specific like policy and procedure manual.
Okay, we'll get that from them. $2016. You said 2022 is when he got the increased pay, correct?
Yes. And there was also, this would probably apply to him as well, that you would need to know, in 2019, the whole police department got a huge raise, and then in 21, they changed the way they get longevity, and it's based on number of years worked, but it's a percentage of your pay, and it goes from 2% to 20%. So, yes.
Whoa.
Yes. So the people who make $100,000 and worked 20 years now make $120,000 a year, just for their longevity, and they get that every year. It doesn't get added into their base pay, so it doesn't compound. But like they made this deal, and we were like, "What are you doing?" All these other cities we know, like in the finance areas, are like they're getting rid of it because actually the city of Elyria, where we're at now, they had that in their. And they got rid of it. So then we're like, why are you negotiating this to give this huge amount?
But
so
then all that would go to your pension too.
yes, it's huge. It's costing the city millions.
Was that part of the union contract
Yes.
negotiations? And since the ordinance says that the
Yes.
captain and the chief get the same benefits, it
Yes.
applies to them. And you said that happened in 21?
Yes.
Do you know if there was an ordinance passed for that? I would want that as
Okay.
well.
So he got the 20% raise in 21, and then they turned around and gave him a huge, like $30,000 raise. But then you add the 20% onto that. And then like I'm sure you're well aware of all these holiday hours and these huge amounts of banks of hours they get every year that is almost impossible for them to use. So then again, they get those all in their termination pay when they leave. And then if you're not using your hours because you're not marking it down, then you're substantially going to get a higher pay when you leave.
So I'm assuming, if you don't know this, that's fine. Do you know the length of time the bargaining unit contracts are for? Is it like a 2-year
3.
contract, 3-year contract?
Yes. And they're negotiating again right now because they actually expired at the end of 2022.
So that tells me which ones I'll need to ask for them. So do you know, you said that he was, the chief was with the department before he became chief. Was he captain before?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Was that a common thing where the captain was still getting, because this ordinance was in effect in 16, so he would have been eligible to receive the higher pay when he was a captain if he was acting as the chief as well, right?
Yes.
Did anybody look, or was there anybody that's ever raised issues if that was taking place when he was captain, receiving chief pay, maybe not doing that properly when he was captain?
I did not go back that far, and I would venture to say the former chief, who unfortunately is deceased now,
Okay.
would not have been away from work very often. He was one of those people that just dedicated his whole life to police work, and he never took off. And he didn't get paid, very much in the first place. And then he, there wouldn't have been very many instances for the captains to get higher position pay because the former police chief was always there. Then he retires and dies. Sad story.
That's so sad. And unfortunately, you hear that all too often. I just thought of something with this report, which is your payroll report. There, other than just looking for, I'm trying to see, other than just looking for when the gross pay changes. Oh, it says higher position.
Yes,
Never mind. So this is the report of just the higher position pay.
Correct.
Gotcha.
So I don't know if that would be helpful to get a report of all the hours paid, like everything that was paid for all of them, just to see.
So.
Well, do you want it for every day? Because I can do like just a one-page recap of the totals, or
I think
every day.
what I would probably be best, because it never fails that I think I don't need something. And then later I'm like, shoot, I need that. So I think maybe both, if that's, so maybe like a summary report that maybe even either broken down by day or even pay period is fine. That might summarize stuff. But then I think I would want a detailed report by person, or I don't know how your system runs it. That would show me, regular hours, higher position hours, leave requests, things like that. Whatever is making up their payroll.
Okay.
And yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, that's okay.
For these three
to
people
email
would
it
be-
is fine.
yeah.
Like to print all these things out.
Yes,
it's just
exactly. And if for some reason, if you get, if the file sizes are weird, let me know. We use OneDrive, and
Okay.
so I can send you like the link for that if you
Okay.
need it. I don't remember the file size limit right now,
Okay.
but if it bounces back, just let me
Okay.
know. It also might be something that I would be interested is that report that you ran for the captain. So for Failing and Watkins, that just is showing that higher position pay. I think I would like just a report of those hours for McCann. And let's do from like 2018 through 2019. I just want to look and see if perhaps, I just want to cover my bases there.
Okay. I know there was a time that he was in the reserves, like the Coast Guard reserves
Yeah.
for a while, and I'm not sure what years it was, but
He was off 2 years.
Yeah, he was off a long time, I remember,
Yeah.
but I don't know
And
what year it
He
was.
didn't get
Years.
deployed. He was home.
Yeah.
Was he?
That was good duty, yeah.
I'm trying to think. Let me look over here. So we've got ordinances. The policy manual is for the police department. I'm going to get from there. I'm going to get their collective bargaining agreement from there, from the police department. Time frame we got that answered. Would like the travel policy or in regards to I think it probably would be covered under a travel policy for like if you have to go training and if it's so many miles away, you get like it. Is there a travel policy for like city that would cover him as well, or do they have a separate one? Do you know?
The city has one. I'm assuming in their policy and procedure booklet they have one. I believe there is also something in their CBA. We also have the travel voucher requests, which I don't know if you'd want that to see
Yeah.
if he was on travel
Yeah.
on those days. That
Because
would
you guys
maybe
are
just-
ultimately paying it out.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would do that from the December of 2019 through current.
Okay.
I don't know that we'll need it now. So typically what we will do is we kind of go through an allegation. This is considered a preliminary investigation, and we will kind of go through and see what we can vet out. We don't necessarily do like 100% testing right now. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. So at this point, like if we were to say, yes, oh my gosh, we think this is a problem, we're going to make this a case, and we were to elevate that to an actual audit, a special audit, then I would be looking for like more recent, like the payroll reports if it's more recent. But at this point, I don't need them for now.
Okay.
But that might be something coming down that I would need.
I mean, do you talk to those captains to verify that of their policy? I mean, just because that's their own department rule. I mean, do you talk to them to say we were only putting in for time when we know he wasn't there? Or do you get that information from someone?
At some point we would, yeah. I mean, like, so if this progresses to something that we think is going to be a special audit or a potential investigation, at some point, yes. And we talk with each other about when we think that's the best time to do that.
And just for my protection, per se, you're going to be asking the police department for this information. And I'm sure they're going to be going, why are they asking for this information? So how is that addressed?
We have
anywhere?
auditors that are working on your audits all the time. Like in this case of an IPA, we'll just say an IPA had a question about saw something in some of the records they were looking at and sent it to us. So we need this information.
Okay. Just because
They're there right now.
Right. But I'm a little scared, honestly, if I don't want to do these kind of things. I wish people would just do the right thing. But I have to do my job, but
Absolutely,
I honestly,
yeah.
in the way of the world today,
We are not going to
You know
say,
what I mean?
oh, well, Karen called us and said you were doing something wrong. No, we wouldn't do that.
honestly, it's kind of, people are scary these days.
Yeah, you don't know. You just don't know.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would be afraid that he would do, and that's why we're just so closed mouth, is he might try to fix things. I know that.
Yes.
And that's why I wouldn't want him to even get
Right.
a notion
Right.
that somebody's looking at him.
And I know the Telestaff program, like documents, anytime you go in
Just going
there.
to ask.
Yes.
I would assume there's an audit trail of some sort.
Yes. If you went in there today and said on December 2nd, 2019, I was here, it's going to show that today you marked that on that date. So there's a paper trail in that sense.
And that's something else too that sometimes we work directly with the software companies too. If the staff may not, which I never realized that there are sometimes that the actual customer of a specific software, depending on what it is, may not actually have access to all the features and functions. Sometimes it's the audit trail, sometimes it's stuff. So we sometimes can go to them and say, can you give me a report of all the adjustments that were made to this account or voids that were made? So if we ever need that, we can contact them directly. And I'm trying to think.
And my thing too is with the COVID and Zooms and meetings at home or working at home. Again, if you are working from home and you know that your captain put in for higher position pay, why would he allow? Like, he's the one that ultimately approved it to go to the next level.
Yeah, I would expect there to be a leave
right.
request from him.
Right.
Or like I said, some kind of something that.
Right. I mean, like, if, say you were just not in the office today and the captain thinks, well, he's not here, I'm going to do something. Well, there should have been some type of communication somewhere, whether it's in the Telestaff saying I'm here, or no, I was working and therefore you're not entitled to the higher position pay. There should have been some type of communication in the software or between each other in emails to say, I'm not here, you need to work for me, or I am here, don't work for me.
And you're not aware if there is such a thing or what kind of supporting documentation they might keep there, correct?
Right.
Okay. Go for my list.
And unfortunately, we have the antiquated paper timesheets in the entire city.
Okay.
So,
Outside of this.
yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. That was my question, right? I know about the audit trail, so we got with that. No, I think that's, for me right now, I can't think of anything else, like clarifications or questions I have about, or maybe records that we need from her. Can you think of anything else? For
The only thing I would say is, like, if we want to get these records for this Telestaff, that would come from this Kelly. Okay, if you could just shoot me her name and title and address that way, because all that I have to put on the subpoena.
Okay.
You know, I don't think we need it right now, but eventually, if we do need it, that way I can
Okay.
Yeah.
send it off to her.
Nope, I think I'm good for that one.
All right, you okay for number 3?
I am.
All right, tell me about this law department issue.
Okay, so this, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background
Perfect.
so you're aware
Sure.
of this situation. So originally, I became the auditor in 2016. We've had the same.
All right. This is the part that you stuck around for. If you haven't seen this, that delves into what I'll be writing in part 2 of my story that's coming out. So if you stuck around this long, this is your payoff right now. All right, this is your payoff. So here you go. Listen. This is the part where they talk about what's going on in the law department, and listen carefully to the Joe and Joe and what's going on there, because that feels like similar to what's going on with McCann. And the important part of this is that Garen had already kind of peeled onto this with Wellington and these other places he was working and been asking for documentation. So when we got to this part in the audio file, I was able to just stop and go, oh, crap. Well, Garen already got me all of this. So here, let's just, let's take all of that and start looking at that. So pay attention to this section pretty closely. Like, this is where we get into what's going to be happening in our second section. So here you go.
Was on vacation or off on other approved leave. The citizens group of which I am part of believes Chief J. McCann took days off without using his bank time. They changed the way they get longevity.
I would be afraid that he would do, and that's.
All right, you okay for number 3?
I am.
All right, tell me about this law department issue.
Okay, so this, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background
Perfect.
so you're aware
Sure.
of this situation. So originally, I became the auditor in 2016. We've had the same IPA company doing our Zupka, yes. And it was kind of our belief that during the audit processes each year, they would come in and they would do their thing, but they would also spend time with us and I believe with each of my auditors, deputy auditors, and ask them, is there anything you're aware of that's going on? Do you have any issues? Do you have any things of fraud? And we would relay the information that we knew about or what our concerns were. So it was our belief that those were getting looked into or discussed with the Auditor of State's office, and when they would come back with the audits and show certain things, there were issues. I mean, we had a clerk of court who was indicted here in the City of Lorain because she was falsifying her employees' timesheets and giving them overtime and giving, marking them as regular hours when they were out. And she kind of did favorites she was doing that with, and the non-favorites.
Okay.
Well, the non-favorites told on her, went to the police department. She got indicted, and it's still pending, I believe. But so that was part of our original thing that we were like, okay, we need to tie this down. We need to get time clocks. We need to do all this stuff. So we were going along telling the audit team what was going on. But in our audits, we really didn't have the matters totally addressed to what we thought would have been the process. So we've gone along, try to do the things we need to do, try to put in internal controls. And then this year, we still have Zupka, but we have a whole new team of auditors, okay? So they were here the week after Easter, and they came in and they started asking for all the information, and they asked me, do you have any things that are going on? And I told them about the payroll issues. We have a lot of problems. I said some people think that basically they do what they want. We need to have the information given to us. We have people fighting us when we ask for information. And so they were like, okay, well, they got the information that we were working on, and they were doing the testing for payroll. So obviously they picked their random people, and there were, I believe, 2 people that were members of the law department staff. And so they asked for the whole trail of, timesheets, payroll entry, to see the actual pay period for these people. Well, the law department did not provide them the timesheets for those people. So all they basically had to go by is what was entered into the system. And so our system is one that all the employees have the paper timesheets. They fill them out, they give them to the payroll clerk every pay. The payroll clerk enters the information in there. They're supposed to run a report, give it to the appointing authority, director, superintendent. They're supposed to look at it, verify that it's entered in there correctly according to the timesheets, approve it, and then it goes on to the next levels, and then ultimately gets to the payroll department here. So we don't see timesheets every pay. We only get what was entered and approved by the departments. We spot check things during the year to say, let's just see, give us this, whatever, which we get pushed back all the time. We don't want to give this. Why are you doing that? You don't have the right to ask. I'm of the belief the auditor can ask for anything, any time of day, any day of the week. But we have been told you're not allowed to do that. You're only allowed to audit once a year. I have emails to show that. But
Who gives you that direction?
that was given to me by the mayor.
Brett?
Yes, because I had asked for some information from the department. Like, my belief is you shouldn't have to go to the safety service director or whatever to ask these questions. I should be able to go to the department head and say, show me your timesheet for this guy.
Well,
No,
Karen.
they don't answer. They don't answer. Well, then I go to the next level. They don't answer me. So then I sent them the information of what.
Oh, Karen, I feel your pain, sweetie. I really feel your pain, baby. Because that's what I go through with these jackasses. And you wonder why I flip them off. I mean, I'm just saying, like, the mayor told her this. The mayor's telling the... So the mayor, a guy who once told me he doesn't have the authority to tell other officials what to do, or elected officials. I don't know. Is the auditor elected? Or is she just appointed? I'm sure Garen knows. But, come on. That's insane that she gets told by the mayor that she's only allowed to audit once a year. And listen to what this guy says about it. I love this because it's all about the Open Meetings Act or Open Records Act.
What the auditor's responsibilities were. And I have an email back from the mayor that says, this says you're allowed, the one Ohio Revised Code section says you're allowed to do it once a year.
Well, I consider this. Joe Blow, who lives in Ward 5, can send you a public records request, or send them a public records request, and they have to produce it. Why would the auditor?
But I don't know why they wouldn't want to. But to me, when you're asking a question and people are getting angry with you or not answering the question, what's your first thought?
Way hiding.
Right. So, and that's what I've gotten in several instances, is anger and things. So this is just a little preliminary information for you. So during their testing, they gave me, they didn't get the timesheets for the 2 people in the law department. Then then they asked for like the entire law department's timesheets for like different periods, because they wanted to see, well, maybe this was just a freak thing that the timesheet was lost. So they asked for several of the employees, and it might have been all of them. and they only gave them a couple. There have been instances where we hear that the lawyers feel that they are salaried employees because they're lawyers. No offense to lawyers, but
I work by the hour.
we've said that before. I mean, we've heard them say, "Well, we're salaried," and our ordinances for them are covered under the non-bargaining ordinances, which are hourly people. And basically, in the city of Lorain, the only salaried people that are truly salaried are elected officials because they get their annual salary no matter what. Everybody else is truly hourly employees.
You said they're covered by which ordinance?
It's a non-bargaining ordinance.
Would there be maybe a couple of them on the manager's ordinance too, maybe in that
No.
department? So their law department is strictly non-bargaining ordinance.
Yes.
Okay. I'm salary. I fill out a timesheet every week.
Yeah. So then the auditor of state, or the gentleman from Zupika came back in my office again, and we had another conversation. And he was like, we were like, well, we don't understand because we've told these problems that we've experienced over the years, and we don't quite understand why it's not addressed in the audit process, or why you guys haven't, helped us or given us a little bit more of a direction to say, or enforcement, I guess we
Yeah.
want to say, So he basically said, hey, we're IPA people, we cannot do this. And I kind of had a sense of feeling with them that, they want to get hired anywhere in the state. So if they are known as nasty people, then people probably don't want to hire them. So I kind of always thought maybe that they just kind of want to not go down that path. And
Go with the flow.
and I didn't know this. Like, I was under the impression they're doing the audit for you guys, so they would be able to do basically everything that the auditor of state would want to enforce. But this was the first year in our meeting that he specifically said, and this was a new gentleman working for us, he specifically said, we can't do that. You need to deal directly with the state auditor's office.
And when he said we can't do that, is he referring to we can't address concerns that you've brought to us, or we can't address payroll discrepancies and lack of information that we find?
Both.
No, I think he was more or less saying we can't address you fixing it or enforcing it, more or less. Like, is what I got out of it. And he was basically like, it's on you, the auditor, basically, that if this is wrong, it's on you. So you need to talk to the auditor's office yourself.
It's on
And
you.
he goes, I recommend you contact them. There's a fraud line. He told me that would be the
I'll
best
listen to this, Anita.
way to do it. So they ask for these payroll records for the law department. They don't have them. They still have not provided them.
Zupka did ask for,
Yes.
again, still haven't?
Yes.
Still
So
haven't provided them.
in my head, after hearing what this auditor told me, you need to talk to someone before it looks like you are doing something wrong. I thought, because this is going to be addressed more than likely in our audit this year, that it appears, based on what happened during this audit cycle, where they were asking for records and they are getting paid a 40-hour work week when... So this, let me back it up. The audit, or the law department has a couple of part-time employees. They are indicated in the ordinance, you are a part-time worker. You get this kind of benefits, and you basically work less than 40 hours a week. It doesn't say how many hours you work, and maybe that's a flaw in our ordinance, because they are part-time, but they always get 40 hours a week, is what is being entered in the computer, that they are paid 40 hours a week. The only thing that concerns me, and this is why I brought it to your attention, is in a conversation that I had with someone in the law department a couple months ago, because we were having a question about an ordinance and the benefits a part-time employee gets. One of the members said to me, well, how do you do it for Joe and Joe? They're part-time. I said, no, they're not, because in the ordinance, they are filling a position called assistant law director, and that is a full-time position. like the ordinance lists all these different positions, and I don't, like, this is just something that is similar to it, so it just shows like a department. I didn't bring the law department, but it shows all
Yeah.
the names of the positions. But in the law department,
Covered by
one-
this section, here's all the positions
Right.
that are governed by this.
Right.
That's okay.
so there's actually like 2 dedicated part-time employees that are part-time. And then the rest of the people are considered full-time. But when the person said to me, well, they're part-time, how do you do it for them? How much vacation are they getting? It kind of raised a little flag in my head because he's telling me that they're part-time, but yet they're in a full-time position. So I'm like, no, they're full-time. And so now that this is all like piecing together in my brain that this was a conversation that I had, and then a couple weeks later the auditor comes in and says, where's your timesheets? And we don't have any, but yet you're getting 40 hours. Everybody's getting 40 hours. It just
You get 40
is a little
hours.
concerning to me.
You get
And
40
you said
hours.
Joe and Joe.
Yes.
What are
You
their
get
names?
40
What
hours.
do you do?
Joe Love.
Everybody gets 40 hours. Let that sink in. The law department. What was the word? What's the word here? Candor. Look up the word candor. And then, I'll post the lawyer's code of ethics. Look up the word candor. And again, your elected official, Mr. Pat Riley, is in charge of these guys. So you got some that are supposed to be full-time and some that are supposed to be part-time. So all we have to do is go back to whenever this was, at 23, and start looking at who was in the law department then. I'm pretty sure not many have changed. And that's what you got going on. But what they're saying right now, if you hear it, is that she's piecing it together in the moment. Wait a minute. If they were working 40 hours a week, these other people would know it. And why would we need that many lawyers working 40 hours a week? But if they are getting paid for 40 hours a week, they need to be there. Also might explain some of the recent changes and shifts, people doing what they want to do. But let that sink in and let this part, kind of marinate with you.
Beck, Laveck, and then Joe Pritchard
Like this
are
part.
part-time, but they always get 40 hours a week, is what is being entered in the computer, that they are paid 40 hours a week. Here's based on what happened during this audit cycle where they were asking for records, and I brought it to your attention, is in a conversation that I had with someone in the law department a couple months ago, because we were having a question about an ordinance and the benefits a part-time employee gets. One of the members said to me, well, how do you do it for Joe and Joe? They're part-time. I said, no, they're not, because in the ordinance, they are filling a position called assistant law director, and that is a full-time position. Like, the ordinance lists all these different positions, and I don't, like, this is just something that is similar to it, so it just shows like a department. I didn't bring the law department, but it shows all
Yeah.
the names of the positions. But in the law department,
Covered by
one-
this section, here's all the positions
Right.
that are governed by this.
Right.
That's okay.
so there's actually like 2 dedicated part-time employees that are part-time. And then the rest of the people are considered full-time. But when the person said to me, well, they're part-time, how do you do it for them? How much vacation are they getting? It kind of raised a little flag in my head because he's telling me that they're part-time, but yet they're in a full-time position. So I'm like, no, they're full-time. And so now that this is all like piecing together in my brain that this was a conversation that I had, and then a couple weeks later the auditor comes in and says, where's your timesheets? And we don't have any, but yet you're getting 40 hours. Everybody's getting 40 hours. It just is a little concerning to me.
And you said Joe and Joe.
Yes.
What are their names and what do
Joe,
they do?
Joe Laveck,
Back.
Laveck, and then Joe Pritchard,
Richard, Mr. Pritchard.
And what are they working as?
They are assistant law directors.
Which would be, is in the ordinance as a full-time position?
Yes.
That non-bargaining unit ordinance?
Yes.
So you'll have 40 hours a week.
They have private practices, don't they?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
And I already asked you for that, right?
What?
The law, that ordinance that would list, like, basically all the wage ordinances
Okay.
is what we want.
Okay.
Is our city stands in the kill?
Now, if there is to be some sort of exception to that, so for example, you mentioned we need an assistant law director position. We know Joe Smith has a law practice. He can only work for us for 20 hours a week, but we feel that we still want to do that. So we know the ordinance shows that this position is full-time, but we want to agree to hire him as part-time. I would expect that to go through council. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes.
It would have to get approved and we would see something.
Yes.
Or maybe, now does your office hold the personnel files for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Have you looked to see for these two individuals if they have any kind of exception in there regarding their,
I don't believe they do. Generally, I see the letters that come through,
okay.
but I don't believe it specifically says you're not going to work on Friday, but you're going to get paid for 5 days a week. It doesn't say a limited amount of hours or, and I know in the non-barring ordinance, it does say something about the appointing authority can set a schedule. It's like kind of in the overtime area where, you know, if my employees, you know, say they had a child and they have to take them to school or something. And it says in the contract or in our ordinance that they work 8:30 to 4:30. So if my employee has a son that they need to take to school or whatever, and I make the arrangement with them to work 9 to 5,
Yeah.
I don't have an issue with that. And if that's what that's what I kind of interpret that to mean, but I don't believe that it should mean I can say you can work at home and mark it down that you were at work. Like their timesheets that I've seen show the 5 days, and
It certainly, I would assume, doesn't mean you're working part-time getting paid full-time.
right,
Or vice versa.
right.
Okay.
I don't believe that's what
The
it means.
lawyers that you mentioned, I believe, are in the civil division of the solicitor's office. They're not prosecutors.
No.
I believe the prosecutors are there a full
Yes,
week.
they're full-time, and they are there Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30, both
Now,
of them.
Do you think that these assistant law directors are going to claim that, well, we go to meetings at night, committee meetings, council meetings?
Well, they could claim that, and that is fine, but in my book, as the auditor, I would think, and this is the conversation we have at, we've had meetings with all the payroll clerks, whatever. I don't have an issue with that. Like, mark it down, you were here 8 to 10, and then you came back 4 to 6, and
Yeah, you have to
anytime you
justify.
cover your ear, it's better, and you
they
have
do.
proof.
So
They have to provide support to you.
They do timesheets, but
Okay.
now
The problem is they can't get them.
They didn't
won't give
provide
them
them to the audit team, and that's what raised the red flag in my head. Because if you don't have a timesheet, then how do you know what they
Yeah,
worked?
I agree, yeah.
So, for the Joe and
We
Joe,
get those.
they are the ones where their position is full-time.
We do
The
have
comment maybe made you think that maybe they were working part-time. Can you tell since you don't have the timesheets, but can you tell based on payroll if they're getting paid a full rate? Like, are they getting paid 40 hours?
Yes.
Okay.
It's pretty hard to square with private practice unless you're doing a lot of night work.
The chickens are coming home to roost, Bobby Boucher. You're going to lose all your fancy foosball friends, and you're going to lose all your fancy foosball games. Because foosball is for the devil? Man. So what, you get what's going on there, right? Like, you got full-time law practices. You guys are working 40 hours a week. All you different lawyers working 40 hours a week in the City of Lorain. And you're just doing all your law work at night. I wonder if I were to run all your cases. See, Garen's already pulled Levesque. Like, his ass was everywhere but in Lorain. Like, he was out in Wellington being a special prosecutor. He was in Norwalk. I know. I found him at Norwalk. He's everywhere but Lorain. He was even a judge or a special judge somewhere. I feel like this guy is all over this county. He's a legal whore. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah, you have to
Anytime you
justify.
cover your ear, it's better, and you
they
have
do-
proof.
so
They have to provide
do
support
timesheets.
to you.
They do timesheets,
Oh,
but
okay.
now
The problem is they can't
they-
get them.
They
won't
didn't
give them to
provide
them.
them to the audit team, and that's what raised the
They don't
red
have
flag in my
timesheets.
head. Because if you don't have a timesheet, then how do you
Do
know
whatever they want.
what they
Yeah,
worked?
I agree. Yeah.
And I'll just go back
So,
and fabricate them
For
now.
the Joe and Joe, they are the ones where their position is full-time. The comment maybe made you think that maybe they were working part-time. Can you tell since you don't have the timesheets, but can you tell based on payroll if they're getting paid a full rate? Like, are they getting paid
No.
40 hours?
Yes.
Okay.
That's pretty hard to square with private practice, unless you're doing a lot of night work.
Yeah.
And you're not 100% sure what hours they're actually working. So maybe they are
Right.
working 40 hours, maybe they're part-time. The comment made you think it was part-time. You're
Yes.
just not sure. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So those are not the two dedicated employees that are part-time employees either, right?
Right.
So now there are two other employees in the law department that are dedicated part-time positions.
Yes.
And what is that position title?
I think it's just called Assistant Law Director Part-Time.
Wow.
Joe Levesque is the prosecutor for, I believe, Wellington.
Is he?
Yeah.
Do you know the names of those people?
Ken Resar, Resar, and Don Zaleski, Zaleski.
I had a very good friend, Dan Zaleski.
Oh, really?
So I knew how to spell that name.
Oh.
All right, so we've got two positions that we know are designated as part-time positions. And what was the concern with them?
Those, I believe we did receive one of the timesheets in the audit process, in the testing.
Were these the two people pulled for testing?
Joe Pritchard was pulled for testing.
Okay.
And I don't recall the other one, but then when they
The
asked for
expanded one,
everybody.
okay.
Yes, the expanded one, we did receive one for Ken Resar, and it showed that he marked down like 29 hours that he worked, but yet what was entered in the computer was 40. So,
And they're working in a part-time position.
yes,
Wow.
He definitely is, I know that.
yes. And I know he's like, Johnny, same thing. He's not, a lot of times he comes here to court or whatever.
Yeah.
And I know he's not working full-time, but I don't know whether they're misinterpreting the ordinance to say you make 50,000. It doesn't specifically say in the ordinance you make 50,000 regardless of how many hours you work. It just says you're part-time.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a flaw in the ordinance with part-time, but if you're marking down on your timesheet that you worked here and here and here and here, then to me, if you're an hourly employee, you should be getting 29 hours of pay at that rate.
There is going to be several things we're going to need for this. Some of them you can get me. Some of them we have to get from there. I will get you a list when we're
Okay.
done.
Okay.
I will give you that when we're done. I'll give it to you today, but I don't need to give it to you right now.
You guys need to
So these people, there's the concern that
boys.
perhaps they're getting paid for more hours. Now, there would be a benefit. Are they getting city benefits? Are they, and I'm assuming the ordinance is going to say, like the breakout of part-time employees are allowed such and such,
Yes.
how that's working? Is that going to be in that ordinance
Yes.
probably? And their time accruals.
Yes.
So if they are turning in your system, so unlike the police department system, everybody else is doing the manual timesheets. Your payroll system is doing the leave accruals and stuff. Is that correct?
Yes.
So if somebody is putting in on their timesheets that are getting entered into your payroll system as working 40 hours, will your payroll system go based on the number of hours or the type of like employee that you're establishing them as? So like I'm sitting at Greg Smith for a new position. He is an assistant law director. He is a full-time position. So when I enter him as a full-time position, does it know to do his leave accruals and benefits based on the full-time position designation or based on the hours that they're submitting?
Our system is set up to have a benefits group. And the
Okay,
benefit
so you
group-
assign the benefit group
Yes.
for the type of position they have?
Yes, so the full-time employees have a certain benefit group that automatically assumes that you're working 40 hours. And then, like, there's some instances throughout the course of a year where someone may have gotten docked or been on administrative leave or been on a leave of absence, where my payroll clerk has to go back and manually adjust their accruals because they shouldn't have earned the full amount.
Sure.
The part-time employees in the law director's office have a benefit group that only gives them what they're entitled to. So they would, they're only going to get, theirs is kind of weird, the two part-time. They don't get really anything. I don't think they get vacation. They might get half sick time. That's all they get. So they are only earning or accruing amounts based on the part-time. But the two full-time employees definitely are earning full-time accrued benefits, and if they're not working 1 day a week or whatever amount of days a week, then they're getting the benefits based on full-time.
And is that the same thing for like leave accruals and stuff? Based on whatever that benefit category you're establishing for them, it's going to know how much vacation time accrues for them based on that.
Yes.
So I have written down here, so for the part-time positions, Ken and Don, it really is not a concern that they're getting extra benefits and leave accruals because your office has properly identified them as part-time.
Yes.
It might be an issue for the full-time benefit people that may be working part-time.
Yes.
Okay.
And the the gentleman from Zupka's, when he talked to us about this, he asked for the ordinance. I gave him the ordinance. He's like, these people are not salary. Because we told them, they always say they're salary, but we don't interpret them to be salaried. And even if you are, like you say, you could have a timesheet. And whatever it is, people in Lorain, Ohio just think that is the worst thing in the world to have to fill out a timesheet, and again, when you're in the finance department, right away, what do you think? If you don't want to fill out a timesheet, I'll fill out a timesheet. I'll show you every day I'm at work. I don't have a problem with it. But when you're trying to hide something, that's when you don't want anybody to see it. But
lack of candor.
Like, for example, our office, we can't earn overtime, but we can earn comp time.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if any of these positions have like any kind of overtime or comp time?
Well,
would it be in the ordinance, do you think, if it says it? Or is there a separate one?
No, they would get overtime or comp time either. It's like at the discretion of the appointing authority.
And is their law director elected?
Yes.
Okay.
You guys keep electing them. I don't know if anybody ever goes up again.
I had a conversation with the full-time prosecuting attorney not too long ago. She happened to be in our office, and we were talking about something. I don't know. We got to talking, and I was like, well, I know you have to come to work sometimes if they have to issue a warrant or if they have to do something specific over, on the weekend where she needs to sign a complaint or wait for the judge to issue a warrant or something. They have to come in, and as do the members of the judge's office and a secretary in the prosecutor's office. So generally, if there's some kind of weirdness over the weekend time, the three of them would come in, and I know for a fact the secretaries in the judge's office and the secretary in the prosecutor's office would get overtime or comp time for those hours. And so I said to her, I go, don't you get comp time when you come in on the weekends? And she said, no, I'm salaried. I'm like, no, you're not. And I try to tell people to get you're deserving of these hours. This ordinance says you work this hour to this hour every day. Anything over this period, you're entitled to overtime. So I'm like, you should be getting extra time if you come in. I mean, and really, from my standpoint, I also look at it from the point of, if you're not keeping track of what time you are here working extra and getting paid, then what if you fell down and had a workers' comp claim? Or what if what if the fire department had to come in the building and we didn't know you were there? Or there's so many things when you work in this area that you have to account for that I look at where people don't think it's an issue. But if you're working in the city building or you're working extra, you should be documenting it somewhere. And I am all for fairness. If the secretary is getting overtime for coming in to serve a warrant on somebody and the prosecutor isn't, that doesn't make sense. You're in the same ordinance.
Exactly. If they're in a separate ordinance, that makes sense.
I agree. But I just I kind of felt bad because I said, "You're missing out because you're entitled to overtime." And no, I'm salaried. I don't think so, but that's your loss. You know, like you can only lead a horse to water, but.
Do you has the audit team from Zupka, have they indicated if they're going to issue findings, or are they still doing their testing?
They're still doing it.
Okay. Are you aware of any? So based on this, you're not aware that Zupka found any issues as far as like asking for like timesheet stuff from other offices outside of the law department, are you? Or was the main issues like the law department is who was not providing the information?
Yes. All the other testing we had, basically what they did was they picked their random list of people. They gave it to us. We asked the departments to give us what they needed. And then once they got that, they went to the departments and asked for any other specific thing they had. That was the only department we did not get what they asked for. So when they came to do on-site testing, we said, okay, here's all the timesheets that you asked for, and we don't have these. So then they said, well, where are they? We don't have them. I said, so then they came and said, we don't have them. So I said, well, what do you do in that case? Well, we know in our mind this was random, that we asked for these, and they're not giving them. So then in order to further look into their procedures, we ask for more to see. So they asked for more, and I don't believe, I thought they asked for maybe 8, and I think they maybe received 3. Or it was a very small amount of what they asked for and what they received.
Do you know, based on your recollection of the sample selection for the payroll testing, do you think it was representative of at least somebody in every department? Do you know? Or do you know if there were some departments that weren't sampled?
It was weird because we even made the comment, there were no 6621 employees, which are like the labor pool of employees. There was nobody pulled from that, which was kind of weird.
Yeah.
But other than that, I know there was a fireman, I know there was a couple policemen, I was on there, they had me pulled.
Mayor's office, anybody in there?
Yeah, they had the mayor himself, which again, that is basically just all you can really show them is your ordinance that says this is what you get. And so,
because that's not dependent upon hours, right? The labor one is under a union though, and they're hourly, and
yes,
right,
yes.
Okay. My concern would be more of just like another like law department mayor where they think maybe they don't have to do that. Okay. Anything else in regards to that complaint that I missed? No. Or I really, I might talk to the Zupka people. Do you know the name of your audit manager that you're dealing with from Zupka?
Christina, I think it's BUSSE. I don't have it. I'm pretty sure. Like I said, she's new. The other one is Joseph Michael, and I don't know, or Michael Joseph. I know there was 2. Michael Joseph Michael. No, Michael Joseph. I don't know what his last name is, just because they were only there for a few days right after Easter, and we haven't really dealt with them anymore in person. So I have their cards.
If you could maybe just shoot me over their information, because I might reach out to them to see if they've got anything and maybe just pick their brain on what they're seeing. You got anything for that one?
Nope.
I think I'm good with that one.
Okay. Is everybody okay if I turn off? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, there you have it. That's the end of that long one. Those are the 2 I've got so far. I imagine there's more that are on their way. But, holy crap. These are the people that, I'm going up against some of these jackasses in court. And they lie to their own people. Why would I believe them in court? Lack of candor. Lack of candor. A lack of candor. The law department questions as the meeting continued. The discussion didn't remain solely focused on old police department, right? Once the investigators began examining how payroll documentation was being recorded and verified, that conversation widens to include another area, the law department. Now, as we see, when I looked at the investigative summary, the investigators raised concerns about documentation connected to payroll practices inside the City of Lorain's law department. The issues discussed involved the way timesheets were being maintained. how employee classifications were recorded, and whether the internal system used to track full-time employees was reflected. The hours were being reported through payroll. Those questions were not presented as conclusions. They were presented as areas investigators wanted to understand better. In municipal government, employee classifications matter a great deal. Some employers are classified as hourly, meaning their compensation is tied directly to the number of hours they record in the system. And others are classified as salary employees, meaning they receive a fixed salary regardless of minor fluctuations in the hours worked during a particular week, right? But even salaried employees are typically expected to document their work activity. And even when I was salaried, I still had to clock in and out. And that's the thing. Internal reporting systems would document that and show it. Timesheets, administrative logs, departmental records often exist to confirm that an employee is performing the duties associated with the position, right? We, the people, have a right to know. Now, investigators are reportedly interested in whether the documentation within the law department accurately reflected how those hours were being tracked. And specifically, that discussion focused on whether the system used by the department itself to record full-time work matched the payroll entries being generated through the city's administrative systems. Now, those questions were not resolved during the meeting, right? In fact, they opened a door to something a little bit investigators frequently encounter when reviewing the payroll documentation in government, a broader inquiry. When investigators begin examining the payroll practices, they rarely stop with a single employee or even a single department. Payroll systems often operate across the entire city government using the same administrative framework. As we heard in what Karen was saying, everything ran through the same system except for what ran over at the police department, which they had their own little system, and it was set up in a way that they knew how to manage. But the same software, the same reporting procedures apply to everyone in the city of Lorain. Apparently, they're just using paper. Jesus. And the same approval process may apply to multiple departments. Usually it's your boss, Riley, in this case. And if questions appear in one area of the system, investigators will want to know, well, hey, similar patterns exist in other places. And that's what appears to have happened during this meeting. What began as a discussion about payroll documentation connected to the police department quickly expanded into questions about how work hours were being recorded and verified in other parts of the city government. And that moment marked the beginning of the next stage of the story. Because once investigators start asking questions whether a system is functioning properly across departments, the focus on the investigation shifts from a single set of payroll entries to a structure of the system itself. The records that changed that timeline up to this point of the story, everything we had discussed focused on, the investigation as it unfolded inside the government office that we were looking at. Now suddenly they shift and they're reviewing payroll reports. Officials, they offered explanations. The chief produced the casual, personal calendar. And ultimately, both the sheriff's office and the auditor's investigators arrived at the same conclusion that became central to their analysis, and McCann at least. They concluded that Chief James McCann was a salaried employee. Now, that conclusion mattered because salaried employees are generally not required to document their hours in the same way that hourly employees are. I'll kind of discuss that as we went through all this stuff. The salaried chief is expected to perform the duties of the office regardless of whether those duties take place inside the building, outside the building, or while responding to matters remote. If someone's salaried, the precise accounting of each individual hour is often less significant. The assumption is that the employee's responsibility is to fill a job in itself, right? Like they said about salary. Just, you're there. But here's where the story takes a turn, right? Because those documents I got that the sheriff magically said they didn't get from me, Sheriff Schmidt and his little crew over there called me a liar. And I'm a social worker. Look, I may be an asshole. I may get my ass kicked, like you say, in bars and all this other crap that you want to run around and talk about me. My teeth may be pearly white. I don't really give a shit. But I'm not a liar. I admit I got my ass kicked in a bar. I let them do it after they hit my, whatever, how much of a choice, really. After I hit my head when I went down, that was it. My doctor recently said that, based on the side effects of all that, she wants to send me to the TBI clinic at the VA. So congratulations, you guys, good for you. But I'm not a liar. And the assumption is that when employees are there, they're doing their job. That's where all of our payroll goes. So I looked at my documents and I looked at the timeline that I had, that I gave to them, and that the investigators were working from. Well, the records I was sent and later provided by the Lorain County Sheriff's Office, or to the Lorain County Sheriff's Office, supposedly. If they got everything I got, then they should be working with exact same documentation. So after I read through everything, looked at it, they did give me all those laws, they gave me all those ordinances, they gave me, 2 investigative end pieces that I've been using for the stories, they gave me, a bunch of stuff. Well, now it shows that during part of the period the investigators were examining, section of it, Chief McCann was not actually classified as salary. He was classified as hourly. That distinction is not a technical footnote. It changed the entire framework of the investigation, right? An hourly employee must document hours, as they were saying. An hourly employee's pay is tied directly to those hours. The system expects that the hours entered in the payroll correspond with the time actually worked. Now, the records I obtained that were sent to me, I should say, show that McCann's employment classification was changed multiple times. Now, I have McCann's 4 copy, the 4 PDFs that sustain his whole personnel file. They're on my page somewhere, and probably in the comment or in the pen section of my regular page. You can go look. I think they're all up. But I went and pulled his personnel records, which I had from previous issues, and I matched them with everything else that we had going on. And the records I obtained from his show his employment classification going back and forth, right? They bounced him. And when you listen to these tapes, I think it was the first one from the county where Rich is talking and stuff, and they were saying, well, it's because he bitched about it, right? So initially, when he first took over as chief, he's like, he is used to being hourly, right? So 40 hours a week and, probably getting away with whatever. Now he rolls into his new job and he's like, I don't want to work this much. So he started doing, like he said, out loud bitching. I'm not going to work 5 days a week. I'm going to work 4. I'm not getting paid enough. The captains are getting paid more than me because they're hourly, yada, yada, yada. I'm salary. I'm only getting so much. So I'm only going to work so much, blah, blah, fucking blah, right? Well, yeah, but no, right? Like, you don't really think about the benefits that come with being salary too, like one or the other. And so he's thinking, well, if I work more hours, I'll get more pay, yada, 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 yada. And they talked about it. You start looking at the accrual rates, you start adding it up. And just like with the guy at the department store I talked about early on in this game, it adds up over the years. And as they've been saying through this entire investigation, it doesn't add up over the years, doesn't that add up, doesn't that add up in accrual? So when he went out the door and they gave him his full retirement, yeah, he went out the door with a golden parachute. It just leads me to believe how much did he have on these people, that they all did this. And when they listened to this, and then they just said, nope. And then the sheriff got it, and he listened to this, and he just said, nope. Although I don't really think the sheriff listened to all of this, because if you listen to this, I mean, you come to the same conclusion that these guys are innocent. That Sheriff Hall said that James was innocent of time card fraud, yet clearly he was changed multiple times. He was switched from a salary to hourly, and then later back to salary again. Those classification changes occurred during the same period the investigators were examining when they asked whether the documentation existed showing that the chief had worked 40 hours during particular weeks. The timeline in the document shows something else as well. During portions of that time, the chief was reportedly taking Fridays off while expressing concerns internally about the compensation levels associated with the position, as I said. Again, none of that automatically proves anything bad, but it doesn't change the context of the payroll questions investigators were asking, right? And then when I get all their documentation added up with all my documentation, and even in the case of the law department added up with the Garen's documentation that he got on Levesque, and I start putting that all together, it all starts to tell a little tale of the way that all the city did. I mean, they were talking about a department head covering for employees. Well, why wouldn't the department head and the utilities department cover for her employees when the chief was covering for himself and his employees, when, everybody seemed to be covering for everybody, except for poor Karen Schreiber. She's just out there just like, well, shit. Why is everybody getting time off? I'm some bullshit. But it doesn't change the context, really. But it does change the context of the payroll questions, though, the investigators were asking. Because if the chief was classified as hourly during those periods, then the question investigators asked during the May 10th meeting becomes much more significant. Did anyone have documentation showing that the chief worked 40 hours? For example, that documentation is not optional, it's required. The records I obtained include personnel documentation, payroll classifications, internal records that show the dates when classification changes occurred. I have all of that. I had it. Doesn't look like they got it because when I asked for a lot of it, now arguably, they said this is a rollout. So I may be getting more. This is one. So the rest may be included. And there may be more to come. But this is what we know today. When I went through everything, I didn't come to the same conclusion either one of them did. He definitely was taking the time, the way that these captains, and it was these captains, it wasn't me, it was a captain that did these numbers, or Karen, because in the sheet I have, which I posted online in one of my stories, like, it clearly states someone took the time to share who was working on those days. And the only way they do is they had access to that telething, right? If they had access to the telething for the police department, that means they worked there. So it was either fouling or it was help me out here, Garen. You're still here. That other captain that left and went to Sheffield, that was in the running for police chief. I mean, again, you look at it like you do anything else. You have a police chief that takes over the guy that he was running against. We can't have that guy running around second guessing his command, all that. He's got to get rid of him. So that guy leaves, but on the way out, that guy leaves an insurance packet with me. That guy was probably the same guy that was asking those questions about the time that he was having to cover for him and all of that. And so Watkins, thank you. So Watkins, maybe he drops that to me right about the time he goes to Sheffield because he doesn't need his insurance packet anymore. He's leaving. He doesn't have to worry about McCann's tyranny. But, why not fire a few shots on the way out? So he gives this to me because he knows the auditor's office didn't do shit with it. So then I go dredging it back up after I get it a little bit here and there, and it explains why the city suddenly took a vague interest in me, trying to ban me from City Hall and all this because I asked these hard questions. And if you say I harassed them or any of this other stuff, no, I don't really care what you think. The Constitution and the government allows me to do what I'm doing. I'm not harassing anyone. I don't seek them out outside of the City Hall. I've never done a rude thing to them outside of the parking lot or the building of City Hall. Ray has mentioned in emails that I've received that he's seen me out and about in the community. Never once have I ever been inappropriate to any of them. I have pictures that I took of Antonio Baez with the Grinch and sent them to Antonio. Like but when you're in that building, when you're acting as my government, I'm not talking to you, the person. I'm talking to you, the government. Enough said. When those records are placed alongside the payroll reports, though, and the scheduling data, they create a timeline that investigators appear not to have fully reconstructed, right? And that timeline tells a different story than the one reflected in the final conclusion of both investigations. Well, I mean, I read Hall's investigation. They did a piss poor job. A piss poor job. I mean, you used to run stuff by me, dude. Like, if you just ran that by, I'd have been like, ooh, I want to add to it. Especially if you want to, like, BS people, you got to give a little more facts. I mean, you don't want to oversell it, but underselling a bullshit story doesn't work either. Like, yeah, Bigfoot took it. Okay, well, what evidence do you have? Piece of hair. Whatever. So, when I look at the timeline that, because by the time the review was completed, both the sheriff's office and the auditor's investigators concluded that McCann was salaried during the relevant period. That was the problem that they brought this up, was because my lawyer kept, messaging, Bob kept messaging like, hey, what are you guys going to do about this? What are you guys to do about this? I had the documents. I'd given it to Shar Schmidt at Bob's request. As Bob had asked several of his clients to give stuff over to Jack Hall's office. And Jack Hall's office immediately torpedoed every last case. Suddenly there was a problem with every last case. I mean, statistically, one of them should have been good. But no, it's kind of like when, someone buys something just so they can shelve it. Luna, stop. Luna. But, you know, according to the documents in my possession, the classification history shows that during that part of the time, he was hourly. I see it. What? These highfalutin auditors can't see it? Our highfalutin sheriff, he can't see it? So, he can't see it? He can't see what's going on here? No? I don't see it. Listen, I don't see it. There's no crime here, folks. Nothing to see. Nothing to see here. Just move along. Move along, people. Move along. Nothing to see here. Listen here, Officer Barbrady. Like, nothing to see. Come on, guys. You want me to believe that guy that conned me, smartest guy I know. No, I'm just kidding. You know, he conned me. You don't think? Anyway. That he can't see that this. How do you miss this? If you saw this, the only excuse I can say is that, well, we didn't really ask for the full report. We just got their conclusion, and we went with it. That's what I think happened here, because I think, you know, somewhere along the line, someone pulled a favor, and status quo was achieved, and everybody went back to everybody. I mean, look, the law department, nobody ever mentioned that again. Nobody ever mentioned that the other thing again, and it's been almost. It sounds like 3 years. This was like 23. They probably fixed the problems, but they never addressed the crimes that they obviously knew. I mean, come on. How many of you people out there in the real world don't know exactly how many fucking hours you work in a week? I mean, I don't know one person that doesn't know how many. I mean, right now, if you're employed, ask yourself, wherever you're at, how many hours have you worked this week? Do you know? Off the top of your head. Can you provide me that? You know, Ken, if you're not, you know, sad about it because you never see anybody because you work 80 hours a week. I know you can't. 40 hours a week. I mean, I guess you could, whatever. Anyway, even if you work an excessive amount, you know, if you know what you make, you know what your hours are. That's it, right? Like, and so, I sit here and I say, all right, well, you guys are telling us all, you know, you guys you just missed this. I found it, and I got this stuff this morning, and I found it by this afternoon. And you want me to believe that you didn't realize all you had to do was pull his personnel file. I already had it. I looked at it. It shows the times his classifications were changed. You obviously had enough to know exactly how much his money was. So you knew when he went from 400 to 800 a day. Right? You knew that clearly. So you guys knew. And if you want me to believe that you didn't know, I just...
A bullshit? A bullshit. A bullshit. A bullshit? A bullshit?
There's no way. There's no way. But anyway, hey, the timeline containing those... I mean, I felt they were setting him up to leave. The timeline containing those records indicates that the classification was later changed back to salary, later afterwards, right? Somebody looking at it now would see it salary. He was salary now, but you got to look back. You know, you got to do that. You know, there's Sergeant, what it's called, right? An investigation. You need to get those things called leads and reports. Oh, wait, you did get some. You just stole them from me, and then you lied about it and made my attorney look bad because he trusted you. I don't hold it against him. I mean, hell, I ended up trusting you too. I showed up at that building out there at the college. I mean, why other reason would I go to LCCCC's off-site building to meet with you and Nietzsche and all them? And at the time, Nietzsche said, anybody that slanders my sheriff, I'll sue. Anybody that slanders my sheriff, I'll sue him. Okay, sue away, Bubba. Like, you know, you're not, he may be your sheriff, but you're not his lawyer. And, you know, so in the end, I watched it go. I looked at the files. It goes back and forth. So in other words, the conclusion the investigators reached was based on the final classification of the position rather than the classification that existed at the time the payroll entries were being created. And that distinction is exactly why the records matter. Because he was salary, and then for a period because he bitched, moaned, and whined, which they talk about. They talk about it. If you were here earlier in these interviews, if you weren't, go back and listen. They talk about it in the interviews that I posted online, these 2 audio files. They clearly state he was bitching and moaning. Rich Resendez is talking about it. He made a big stink about the fact that he wasn't getting paid as much as the other captains, blah, blah, blah. And I imagine that's why Watkins went and got the information, or maybe it was Fouling, but somebody went and got it and was like, F off, man, no. And, and you listen to Karen talk, the law department's down there. A lot of departments down there bugging around when the auditor's there because they want to know. They want to control everything. Just like, they don't want to act like they're not conflicted in everything that they do, but they are. They want to act like they're so smart and so much better than everyone else, but they're actually scummy. They can't even tell the truth about their own payroll. Lack of candor. A lack of candor. As they would say in Game of Thrones, shame, 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 shame. I mean, you guys have the balls to call Bob something like, or respond to me in a negative way. I mean, look at what you were doing. And again, that guy pointed out clearly, well, he's a prosecutor in Wellington. Yeah, I know. We have those records. That's what's coming. Your entire law department in the city of Lorain is, I don't know what to call it. But it sounds like they're not double dipping. It's more like payroll fraud. I've seen several of these things. I saw one recently where this guy was supposedly holding 6 different positions and making all this money, and he had all those jobs, but he was supposed to be full-time at only one of them. Yet he was all over the place in all these others. Mr. Levesque, you find yourself in a very actionable position, my friend. So you're supposed to be full-time, if I got that right. And if you're supposed to be full-time here, it's 40 hours a week. And then you're supposed to be the Wellington prosecutor. And then, I don't know, I think you just took a job over and as the law director of Sheffield. And then you got your own private practice. And I've found you in other areas like Norwalk, special prosecutor, taking this job, that job, this job, that job. Like I said, you're quite the legal whore. I mean, they call it journeyman, a nomad. You sell your services to the highest bidder and only give them the minimum amount of service that they can get, and then you flight off to the next city to abscond with their tax dollars as well before you file a PPO for your business. So again, you guys wonder why I don't want to deal with these people and why I think these people, yeah, I know, just PPP, yeah, whatever. You people don't understand why I'm disgusted with dealing with these folks. They can't. You want me to believe they can write a law? They can't even fill out a timesheet. Something that the most basic of people is capable of doing. These are your most educated law department, right? Your 4 doctorates, and between the 4 of them, they couldn't fill out a fucking timesheet. Reeser puts 26 hours. But they said he worked 40. Fuck off. You self-righteous, pretentious prick. You guys are something else. For you to look down on Bob, who is actually a good person and tries to do the right thing and actually stands up for people and values people's cares and concerns about them, you sons of bitches are just assholes. You guys hate me. You got Pat Riley that you voted in for like 5 years straight, and you listen to the things he says in this report. And I've read some of this stuff because McCann didn't want to be recorded. So in the files, he says, I put the quotes online, and TJ and somebody were asking all day, like, what do they mean? What do they mean? Well, this is Pat Riley. He's saying things like, Lorain, the city of Lorain is hated by dog owners. Pet lovers everywhere hate Lorain. You've got Zaleski offering him excuses. You guys just don't know how hard it is for James. I mean, come on. Everyone's covering for everyone. It's one big fucking circle jerk. And again, listen, I know. I don't know what to make of the whole cheating thing. You buddy with them. Maybe that's what you guys, maybe Bird, you should have told that to the city of Lorain. We're conflicted because we're friends with James when I asked you guys to investigate, not somehow Aaron caused the problem. Because that's the thing I have. Everybody seems to like throw it back at Aaron. And I'm like, please don't do that. Please don't throw it back at me. Like I just feel like everyone's friends with everyone and it's kind of gross. But I don't know. Maybe, you know, again, I also understand that it may not be I'm conflicted because we're friends. It very well may be I'm conflicted because James had something on everybody, I think. And if you don't believe he had something on everybody, then how did he make this go away? And how did the law department make theirs go away after 3 years? They probably fixed the problem or found new ways to do it. Because when you reconstruct that timeline using the documents that I have, that were given to me, the sequence of events becomes clear. The classification changes, the payroll entries, the higher position pay issued to acting chiefs, the dates when the chief was reportedly not present for duty. And that comes from one of the captains, most likely Watkins. When those pieces are placed side by side with the form of the timeline that the investigators appear to have missed, I provided copies of these documents to the Lorain County Sheriff's Office during the course of review. However, the sheriff later stated, along with Mr. Nietzsche, and I mean, because again, Janice Gura wrote all their names in it, just like when the court administrator wrote and Weitzel wrote all the names of the judges in, or said the judges of the juvenile court. When you bring everyone's name in and invoke the authority of the office, the sheriff later stated those records had not been provided. I have photos of them. I have emails showing my lawyer told me to cooperate, provide the records to them. I have those emails showing that. I have the emails talking to them, setting up the interview. But they want to pretend like I didn't give it to them. And then they want to write a bullshit statement. And then they want to get mad at my lawyer for being mad at them for being two-faced liars. Now you want to sue the commissioners? I get it. Oh, suddenly now you see the light? Please. But the claim rises out of a simple but important fact. I still have the documents. They thought I got rid of them. I did tell them, honestly, like at the time I was like, yeah, I said, I don't want these. These are, I don't know what to do with them. I said, you know, and I feel like you guys need the originals because it's the envelope they came in for chain of evidence, blah, 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 right? I was very upfront and forward about that. I don't want them. I don't need them. I don't have any other physical copies of these. I didn't say I didn't have my emails. I didn't have physical copies, but they were still in the email world. I still had them because I had sent them to people. I'd uploaded them. So they thought I just didn't have them. Again, everybody always believes everything I say because I am truthful, but you have to see what I'm saying. Like, if I'm pointing you in a direction, you have to wonder why. But I digress. That's for another time. The timeline, you know, that timeline that they had, I mean, really the timeline will be the focus of the next part of my whole investigation, right? I'm going to go through their timeline, my timeline, everything I have, the documents, and we're going to walk through the classification changes, the payroll entries. I'm going to open up and look at the, McCann's his personnel files, tie those dates down myself, and verify everything with what was sent to me by Watkins or Fallon or whatever captain sent it to me then. Because, you know, again, it would make sense because, again, now they're attacking me because loose ends. I'm a loose end. Everybody wants to get rid of me once they've used me as a weapon. But once you lay the records out chronologically, the picture becomes much clearer. I mean, obviously, whoever gave me these was using me as a weapon. And I apparently have been happy to assume the role. So you want to be mad at me, don't be mad at me. Be mad at everyone around you. You get mad at me because what? Because a captain in the police department gave me information. Be mad at me because the sheriff gave me information. Be mad at me because the sheriff used me to go after Rich. And Rich is mentioned in this, who's going after James, who is actually friendly with James, and the prosecutor is friendly with James, so they can't do it, but they're all giving the investigation the testimony in regards to it, and the SICU does it, and then they kick it back. I mean, Jesus. Do you guys recognize how this is? Ping pong? They all protect each other. Anyway, the questions investigators were asking during that meeting began to look very different. So, you know, what happens when that timeline's wrong? Well, at this point of the story, you know, something important has to be addressed because the question is no longer just about the payroll, right? or the calendar, the question becomes much larger than that. What happens when the foundation of the investigation is built on a timeline that's incomplete or incorrect? So the investigators at the auditor's office and Lorain County Sheriff's connected ultimately reached basically both the Lorain County Sheriff's Office and the investigators connected to the Ohio Auditor of State ultimately reached the same general conclusion about the payroll issue. They determined that Chief McCann was a salaried employee. And because of that classification, they did not find sufficient evidence that payroll documentation had been falsified. On paper, that conclusion makes the issue appear relatively simple. If the chief was salaried, the argument goes away. Bingo, bango. And then the precise accounting of hours worked becomes less critical because the position itself is compensated based on the responsibilities of the office rather than the strict recording of hours, as it was supposed to be by law before and as it became by law later when they gave him the pay raise. But those records show that the chief's employment classification changed during the period where investigators were examining it. All right. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like my mom saw my little things the other day, but my puppets. But maybe this is a good point for my puppet come out from my therapy days. Like I would be like, maybe I'm crazy. So you want me to believe that, like right in the middle of when James knew that this investigation was going on, and he knew that he had been bitching about being a full-time employee and then being, wanting to be not salaried but hourly. And then suddenly, in the midst of an investigation where they're investigating him for time card fraud, he is magically moved back to salary. Now, do you think that's coincidence or bullshit? Bullshit. I mean, again, I just think like it sounds like bullshit to me, right? It's bullshit to him, it's bullshit to you, it's bullshit to me. Like, I don't know. Like the period. So you changed it while he was there. And what? You state Yoder and the rest of you investigate. I mean, you wonder why I have to correct the AG's investigators too. It's like, what are you guys fucking stupid? You didn't ask for the personnel files? Or worse yet, you're not stupid. You guys actually are just incompetent. Either way, it's unacceptable. Because when you look and you see that he should, they even said it. They said it in the interview with, well, he was bitching about it, so it made him salary and made him hourly, and then they moved it back, right? Because they needed to cover his ass because suddenly they realized, oh shit, he is in verification time fraud. So, I mean, at the same time, how do you get rid of the law department stuff? Well, Riley and crew are like, well, fuck, you cover for them. Scratch my, right? Someone had to pay the price. Someone had to be the distractions. Who was the distraction? The lady over in the utilities department or whatever, right? Those two just suddenly go away. Nobody ever hears this investigation. They never know. Till I get my paperwork. And then Hall gets his paperwork from the auditor, just was like, whatever. And I go, oh, hell no. So now you told me, okay, get the auditor already investigated, which I never knew. So now I request it from the auditor. I wait a couple weeks and I get this. And I'm going to get more. You guys want to ban me from City Hall because, not because of who what I do, but you want to ban me from City Hall because of what I represent. So, nice. So the records that show the chief's employment classification changed during the period investigators were examining, and at different points the position appears to have been treated as hourly, then later converted back to salary. And if you look at that timeline, it matters because if an employee is hourly during the time the payroll entries are made, and then the system expects those hours to be documented. An hourly employee cannot simply rely on the general description of work performed. The hours themselves must exist in the record. The documents I received and later provided to the sheriff's office show the sequence of those classification changes. They show when the records are compared with the payroll entries and the scheduling data. They raise questions about whether the investigation was working from the correct timeline. The sheriff's office later stated that those records had not been provided during their review. But the copies exist, and they still do. And those documents show the classification changes were not reflected in the final conclusions of the investigation. Period. That leads to an uncomfortable but unavoidable question. If the timeline used to evaluate the payroll issue was incomplete, then the conclusions based on the timeline may also be, you guessed it, folks, incomplete. And that question does not exist in isolation because the same sheriff's office that reviewed the payroll matter also reviewed allegations connected to actions taken by Chief McCann involving yours truly. So if the investigators were working from an incorrect or incomplete understanding of the payroll classification timeline, it raises the possibility that other parts of the situation may not have been fully examined with, let's say, the full record either, or the full weight of an investigation that deserved itself, right? And that's not really a conclusion, but it's a legitimate question because investigators depend on records and investigations depend on records and they depend on timelines. And they depend on reconstructing events based on documentation that shows what actually happened and when. And if the timeline investigators relied on missed the key documents showing that the chief's classification had changed during the relevant period, then the underlying issue begins to look very different. When you step back and you look at the entire sequence of the records, stop it, and another possibility begins to emerge. And what investigators were looking at may not have been simply a misunderstanding about the schedules of remote work during a controversial incident, right? It may have been something much more straightforward. Time card fraud. In government accounting, time card fraud occurs when an employee is paid for hours they were not actually worked or documented. Now, when the employee is classified as hourly, those hours must exist somewhere in the record, somewhere. And when the documentation does not match the payroll entries, investigators will normally examine whether the records were entered inaccurately, whether the system itself was manipulated. That's why the classification timeline matters so much. Because if the chief was hourly during the time the payroll entries were made, then the system required documentation showing that the hours that were worked. And the documents I obtained show that timeline, right? I clearly see it. The person was kind enough to lay it out for me. Like it has his name or his initials, JMB, or I don't know, JBM, JOM, I don't know. And then, it shows that he has records, and it shows when the other chiefs were there and when he wasn't claiming things. Yet the final conclusions of their investigation relied on the assumption the chief was salaried. And it did so off of his calendar, too. Only judged 1 week. God, I wish you guys are just nice. When the assumption becomes the foundation of the analysis, the issue begins to disappear. The question is no longer where the hours are documented. The question becomes irrelevant. When that happens, a payroll issue that might otherwise require deeper examination can quietly just fade away. In the end, the investigation concluded without finding any wrongdoing, but the records still exist, and those records tell a timeline that investigators appear to have missed. Whether the timeline was overlooked, misunderstood, or simply dismissed is a question that deserves a closer look by not me, by somebody else, but because of the classification of the position changed during the exact period, right, that investigators were examining, then the payroll question that triggered the investigation may not have fully been answered at all. Well, folks, that brings the story along the way to closing, and this what makes this entire story remarkable is not simply the questions investigators asked or the explanations that were offered during the meeting, but makes it remarkable is how the entire situation began. There was no dramatic whistleblower walking into the office with a box full of documents, right? There was no criminal complaint that suddenly appeared out of nowhere. There was no raid, no flashing lights, no taking of computers and kicking down doors. It began with transparency. Some person, apparently a captain in the police department, but some person in Lorain asked for payroll records. That triggered the ordinary machinery of government. The auditor's office had to generate the reports. Payroll systems had to be open. Scheduling data had to be reviewed. Administrative approvals had to be checked. The internal mechanics of how the city tracks work hours and compensation had to be examined. And once the records were assembled, the numbers raised questions. Questions about higher pay positions, questions about hours worked and how they were documented. Questions about how the police department's payroll entries lined up with the department's scheduling system. Those questions were serious enough that they eventually brought representatives from Lorain County Prosecutor's Office, investigators for Ohio Auditor of State Special Investigations Unit, and the city officials into the same room. And that's how oversight's supposed to work. Public record laws exist so that citizens can examine how government operates. They exist so taxpayers can verify how public money is spent. They exist so that the public can ask questions when the numbers don't make sense. Sometimes the biggest investigations begin with the simplest of requests. Show me the records. But the story doesn't end when the investigators close a file, because records do not disappear simply because an investigation reaches a conclusion, right? The payroll classifications still exist. The scheduling data still exists. The internal personnel records still exist. I've asked for some more of them just to seal up my deal here. The timeline contained in those documents tells a story that investigators appear to have misunderstood. Both the Lorain County Sheriff's Office and their worthless investigators, and the investigators connected to the auditor of the state, who ultimately can actually be excused because maybe they weren't given the documents. I know the sheriff was, because I gave it to him. I can arguably claim that maybe the investigators of the state just didn't realize that they were making a mistake, and that during that one little window he was salaried, and then he was not, and then he was again, and that's because he made a decision. And then they changed everything, and then they gave him a pay raise, basically to say, okay, well, if you're not going to get those days off, we'll just give you this money. Again, I wish I knew what he had on them, because that's all they talked about in the interviews was how much money he was making. He made more than Farber. He made more than anyone. But hey, once they decided that he was salaried employee, that collusion effectively removed the central question investigators raised during the May 10th meeting. And if someone's salary, the reasoning goes, the exact documentation of hours become less critical, and the employee is paid the responsibilities of the office rather than the number of hours worked, like the law department was trying to say, like the utilities department was trying to do. But the records I obtained show that classification timeline investigators relied on does not match the classification history reflected in the documents. That just makes me think not everyone got all the documents. And those that had them didn't share them, and nobody really wanted to dig. Because those records show that during the portions of the period, the investigators were exactly examining the chief's position had been treated as hourly. Period. Before later being returned to salary. Period. So again, during the records show that during portions of the period investigators were examining, the chief's position had been treated as hourly. That means during that entire time before he moved, and then later being transferred or returned to salary. And that distinction matters because an hourly employee must document hours worked. Payroll entries for hourly employees are supposed to correspond with documented time in the system. And if the position was hourly during the period when the payroll entries were made, then the documentation investigators are asked for during the meeting becomes far more significant. Did anyone have documentation showing the chief worked 40 hours? If the position was hourly at the time, the system should contain those hours. Somewhere in the record, instead, the primary documentation investigators ultimately relied on was a personal calendar extracted from his phone. Meanwhile, the records showing the classification timeline were not incorporated into the conclusion of the investigation, and I provided those documents to the Lorain County Sheriff's Office during the course of their review. The sheriff later stated the records had not been provided, but the copies still exist, guys. I got them. And those documents show the timeline investigators appear to have missed or avoided or ignored. And when those records are examined alongside the payroll reports and the scheduling data, the picture begins to look very different from the one reflected in their final investigative report. And this issue was not isolated to one person, because the records also show that Attorney Levesque, who works within the city's law department, experienced similar classification changes between hourly and salaried status during portions of the same general time frame. From what I can tell, I don't know, I'm going to have to look at his a little harder, because it might be some of his other jobs that he was salaried on, and I got that wrong. But Levesque is a lawyer working within the city's legal structure, and that fact that similar classification shift appears in another department raises additional issues, right? And so, we look at what really makes it remarkable is the simple, not the questions the investigators asked or the explanations that were offered. What makes it remarkable is how the entire situation began, right? And I've said that we've got these requests, and we've got all of these players assembled. But this is why public records laws exist, so that citizens can examine how this stuff works. They exist so taxpayers can verify how that's being spent, right? And in the grand scheme of things, when we look, the payroll classification still exists, the scheduling still exists, the data still exists. And when we examine those records, the Lorain County Sheriff's Office investigators and everyone else really messed up. They just either they skipped it intentionally or unintentionally or ignorantly. But we all know the difference between hourly and salary. And most people are hourly, especially in a right to work state. Everybody knows keeping track of their hours. So the sheriff could have looked at what I provided and just been like, whatever, I guess. But when we're looking at now Levesque doing it, and we have this other department in the utilities department possibly doing it, the broader context matters. When we look at the conduct of McCann, because his tenure had been marked by repeated controversy and confrontational behavior towards critics and members of the public. He had been written up for being against LGBTQ. He had been written up for his behaviors towards city council, to other people within the city, towards his own officers. He ended up getting basically forced out. The pattern of retaliation and hostility towards individuals who question the department's actions did not occur in a vacuum or a bubble. It developed alongside a leadership style that often responded to scrutiny with personal attacks rather than transparency. That pattern is part of the reason the payroll records became so important in the first place, and part of the reason why Karen was so scared. Because transparency forces the uncomfortable questions in the open. And in the end, the investigation concluded without finding wrongdoing, right? The official narrative became the payroll issue had been explained, right? That the chief was salary and the matter did not require further action. But the records didn't disappear. The money and the records and the classification, the scheduling data, and it's not over, because transparency is not going to end when a file is closed, because I'm getting more documents as we speak. And transparency means that the public still has the ability to examine the records and determine whether the conclusions reach the actual match the documentation that exists. And even no matter what you guys try to do by forcing me out of City Hall so I can't ask questions and be there to document it, I'll start sending my body cam and my gear on somebody else, and getting the information I need to get, because you can't stop the news from getting out, whether you like the opinions of the person giving it or not. So sometimes the most powerful tool citizens possess is a simple one, right? Just make them show you the records. We all have the right to do that. Sometimes the records will reveal a story that someone hoped they could keep locked away forever. So with that, I want to thank you guys for tuning in tonight. This has been a production of Knapp Media LLC, and I'm Aaron Knapp, and all views here expressed are the views of me, and my podcast is licensed and LLC, and please don't use it for any other purposes than it's intended. This is not intended as legal advice or any of that stuff, but you guys just take a long, hard listen to these audio files that I provided you tonight and ask yourself, again, it's not me, it's not Aaron. Karen Shaver did this, law enforcement did this, Watkins did this. This is not me. This is just stuff they never expected would ever get out, and they brushed it under the table. And again, I can show you in my records where he was hourly. And even they talk about it in the audio file. Well, he was hourly for a little while because they bitched about it. And then he got moved back because they realized it was a problem. It fixed the problem, though, didn't it? So anyway, I'm assuring they fixed the law department problem by now too. But again, lack of candor. Quick update on my before I go. Quick update on my my case for getting back into City Hall. So the courts went ahead and granted their 7-day extension, which in the grand scheme of things isn't that big deal. They said they had some witness they want to bring, which I don't understand because we got video of it. And unless I broke a law, which I didn't, and anything you're going to say I said or did would be on one of the 3 different cameras I have. I think it was just a delay tactic on their part. But I told them I want to know the witness's name. I want them to provide it. I wanted a chance to depose him before the date of the hearing. And I pointed out the constitutional aspect of this is that to understand constitutional torts and claims, the city of Lorain wants to keep me out. So even though I'm the one that filed the motion, the burden of proof is on them to prove why they want me out, not the other way around. So they need to prove for the constitutional side of things that I've done something that allows them to kick me out. Everyone say I didn't disrupt the meeting. I sat there through the whole meeting, didn't do anything. I videoed, I did my thing. I tried to ask questions after like a normal journalist would. They want to frame it with aggressive words, interrupted, blocked the door. No, let's phrase it right. I was walking through a door when a door hit me. I did not ask for it. It was unwanted physical contact. Mr. Karen was already in my face at that point before he moved back over to the place he was at to pick up his gear again. I mean, he walked away, picked up his stuff, came back twice to bump me. So, I mean, you look at it however you want. We'll see how the court looks at it. They did get their extension. They got granted the extension. Now, I filed something today basically asking for them to lift the restriction in between now and then. Now, do I have a lot to do down there? No, but my stories are taking a hit when I'm not able to go there. Luckily, I was able to get this information today from the auditor's office, which helps fill a huge gap in my viewership and my listenership. And regardless of whether people want to believe that or not, it does matter. Statistics matter, whether people like, you know, the one guy comes in and makes fun of me for the bar thing, or you come in and tell me to kick rocks, or you come in here because you like me. All interactions matter. And, you know, so when I lose interactions because they've taken me off the air or taken me out of the city hall to get the information I need. And it's amazing because on that very night, I'm going to be reporting more on South Shore. They voted on the thing over at the hospital for the demolition over there. And they also talked about the gun law, which we have already appealed. So I do appreciate you guys tuning in. Much as people want to think I am, I'm not crazy. You may not like the way I talk. You may not like the way I assert my rights, but I don't touch people. Words don't hurt. So let's tell you guys, you didn't get a door slammed on you, but I did. And now I have to go see my doctor about TBIs because, again, you know, she, like everyone else, sees the videos online. When you're getting hit with doors now, you need to go to the TBI clinic. So and I gave them all this records. They know it. Ray knew it. I gave Ray. That's the funny thing is I can lay my disability out like a playbook. And I wrote him a letter, the city, and said, don't do this, 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 and this. And everything that was on that list, he did with a checkbox and smiled while he did it. So you guys want to call me the jerk? That's fine. You don't like what I said? That's fine. You said I interrupted. No, I was asking before he even went over there to talk to her. And again, as I pointed out, there was a doorway he could have used behind him and gone into an office. Instead, he continued to walk down a public area where I had to leave. I waited till he got outside, and what did he do? He just stayed there in the front. Of course, I'm going to talk to you if I see you on government property and I'm upset with you as my government. I'm going to redress you as my government. I have every right to do that constitutionally. Harm you? No. Hurt you? No. And that's why everybody always talking about that. Like, on one hand, you guys will say I'm this, that, and the other, and I got my ass kicked and I got hurt, but then I ask you to say you're afraid of me. No one's afraid of me. I've never given the inclination to anyone that I would harm anyone or hurt anyone. I just don't have that ability anymore. Not that I would want to. So with that, I will leave you guys. I thank you guys for tuning in. Law enforcement be lawful, not awful, especially you, Fallon. And again, I hate to be the guy to take out two chiefs of police, but you know, it seems like he might have been tied in anyway. So you just got to look and see, you know, is he a product of the system, the same system that caused this situation? Yeah. And are we paying too much? Yeah. And it's 2% to 20%, this extra money. That's where a lot of your budget's going. Those are the kind of agreements they're making while you're not paying attention. Start paying attention, folks. I'm the only one that was apparently paying attention beside Garen. They tried to get rid of Garen with criminal charges, and then they tried to get rid of me without criminal charges. So they're doing whatever they can. So how long before the next one of you decides you don't like a project they're doing and they get rid of you? Because I have pre-planning, I have method, I have everything from Ray. I have all his emails. You guys just that are doubting me don't have to take the time to look at it. But I promise you the court will. And what I wrote the other day, if the court doesn't take it, if they don't realize what I'm doing is I'm setting up for a federal appeal because I filed here. I don't have to. I could have filed in the federal rights court. but I filed for the injunction at this level. That way, when they diss me around, it'll make my civil case that I have to file much better. So again, they're going to catch a 1983 case over this, and all 5 cops will lose their qualified immunity. So if you don't want to lose your chief, your captains, and everyone, I strongly suggest you call up your insurance company right now and you offer me an obscene amount of money to shut the fuck up about this. And I mean an obscene amount of money. Otherwise, Fowling, Thompson, all of them, you can be mad as you want. I gave you every opportunity. I said to you, under threat of arrest, yes. Okay. I told you, Fallon, you know you're violating my rights. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. I told you how. Okay, have a good day. That's not the answer you should have answered with. And if you guys had taken a little more training on constitutional law, you'd know that. Right then and there, I told you, you violated my rights and you lost your immunity. And you guys can be mad, oh, you yelled, you instigated, whatever. They're supposed to be better than. Not me. I had to be better than when I served. I couldn't just go around shooting people, spitting on people, hitting people with doors, chest bumping people. I would have gotten in trouble. So for as much as you guys act like, oh, you wanted me to treat that place like it's sacred, well, they treat it like it's a fucking MMA arena. No. Carry-On lost his fucking mind that night. It's seen in the pictures. He got all crazy and aggressive. You wanted me to be the good one and the calm one. Look, a veteran with PTSD, TBIs, who had told them that if you get in my face or you jump at me or you yell at me, certain things are going to happen. And they do it anyway. And I still managed to not touch anyone, hit anyone, or do anything. Just stand there, smelling his breath when he was that close to me. I think that in itself should have told you everything you need to know about what I'm going to do. Once I knew I'd give him a roadmap on how to instigate me, I knew I had to figure out a way to stop feeling that way. Luckily, I was able to contain myself when he got in my face, but I don't think that's what he wanted. That's what none of them want. They're hoping for that. I mean, otherwise, why send 6 guys for me? I've never been violent with them. I've never done anything, but they send the chief of police and 5 high-ranking officers, you know, and I don't know what Valley makes, but if he makes what Chief McCann made, then he's making $800 for fucking a day. So he made $800 to come kick me the fuck out. Thanks. I went from, cheering a guy to having to deal with this shit. And of course, like I said, no good deed goes unpunished. So again, this was the news. That is the news. That's all the news. That's brand new with Aaron Knapp and Unplugged News. So thank you very much and make it a wonderful evening and wonderful day and a happy Friday.